can, okay, quickly go through some guidelines to get us all on the same page. So first of all, my name is Bushra, for those who don't know me, and I'm the current head of education at the PYF. And today we have a few volunteers joining us as well, so I'll let them introduce themselves before we hand over to Neelam. So Tabish?
Okay. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Tabish, and I'm a PYF member. From the background of my profession, I'm a management consultant currently based in UK. And I'm very close to this topic because of my professional qualification and the work I do. So I'm really excited about this workshop.
Thank you for joining us, Tabish. And Zainab, briefly introduce yourself. It's okay, you can just speak. Zainab's my sister, and she's sitting next to me, and she's going to speak through my microphone. Bolo, loudly.
So, hi, I'm Zainab, and I am a member of PYF. I'm based in Dubai, and I'm a project coordinator at a tech company.
So really quickly, guidelines, and then over to Neelam. So usually if you're in a classroom, we'd say put your cell phones away, but you're not in a physical classroom. So you will probably be using some tech device to log in. But the rule is just, the guideline is just that as much as possible, try not to be distracted and focus on the session so you can follow what's being said. Secondly, this is a workshop, this is an interactive space. We want to encourage people to withhold judgment when they're talking to one another, when they're discussing something or going through a topic. Come here with an open mind. This is kind of important. If possible, please keep your cam on. This is because we want people to feel as safe and comfortable as possible. And we've noticed that when more people have their cams on, the session is more interactive. So if you can, if possible, please do switch your cam on. And I might be reaching out to you one-on-one to like ask if you can do that as well. Let's see, you're here to learn. So keep an open mind, open cam, open mind. And definitely this is a workshop, not a seminar, not a lecture. So feel free to discuss and express yourself. How to do that? Two things: the chat box, please feel free to type your thoughts in the chat box. And secondly, if you want to say something, if you want to answer, just raise your hand. So the raise hand function is a Zoom function actually, and you see it on the right-hand side above the chat box. So if you're attending, you should see a little button there that says raise hand. So you can just raise your hand whenever you want to speak or answer a question. And when you're done, don't forget to lower your hand as well, so we know that you're done speaking or communicating. If for some reason you've raised your hand a few times or we haven't noticed that you want to speak, you can also just message me or Tabish, let us know that, hey, we're trying to say something. Can you, let us be heard? There's that. Respect the process. So don't be impatient. Don't jump the gun. Let the instructor finish what they're saying before offering your thoughts. And finally, yes, please enjoy yourself. And with that, I'm now going to hand over to Neelam. Zainab, you can share your screen and help Neelam out. Your voice is not very clear, Neelam. Something is that. It was fine before.
Can't hear you.
Now it's gone. No, something is up. There's some background noise coming from someone as well. I don't know.
While Neelam is trying to fix this, we can blame it on 2020.
Yeah. So can I ask two of the members if they can provide a quick intro? Sorry, I don't have your details. Taki and Hamza. Oh, Taki is Neelam's brother. It's fine. And Hamza.
Yes. Assalamu alaikum.
So can you tell a bit about yourself, which school you're from, or?
I'm from Pakistani school again, and I study in grade 12.
Okay, thank you
And
so much.
okay, that's it.
People
Thank you.
in the
Thank
chat
you.
box. People will type in the chat box. Neelam, you want to try again? Oh, you're okay. You're still fixing it. So
Are you guys able to hear me?
yes.
Now we can hear you.
I'm not sure how long this would survive, but okay. I thought my laptop should work directly, but anyway. So now that I'm clear and audible, I hope everybody else is also able to hear me. I could see a thumbs up sign on one of the windows as well, so thank you. All right then. A very good morning to everyone. My name is Neelam. I was got in touch from Zainab, who's part of the PYF team, to put down a session on request in terms of financial literacy and the basics of financial literacy. From my background perspective and my introduction, I was born and brought up in Dubai. My schooling's from there. From a background perspective, I'm a chartered accountant. I completed my ACCA recently, my CPA. And apart from this, I've done a bit of psychological courses like NLP and project management, etc. From work perspective, I've been working in the last 5 years in FedEx as an accountant first, and then a financial analyst. And we do a lot of, well, my current role is involved in a lot of budgeting per se. So it goes very well with the session that we have today. Um, and I'm based in Dubai, but for today, I'm actually hosting the session from Pakistan. Quite an unplanned trip, but yes. And I was looking forward to the session. So I hope everyone enjoys the session. I've tried to keep it as basic as possible. It was actually a bit of a challenge for me because I'm used to looking at it from a very high level chartered accountancy point of view and not a student's point of view. So now breaking it down to people who might be non-finance or not really into accounting yet. I hope this session is as straightforward to understand for someone who's even a non-finance person. So I'm going to look forward to this. So we'll quickly jump on to the introduction, first few slides. Zainab, if you could please switch on to the next. All right. So this is pretty much the agenda we have for today. We've got an introduction session where I've introduced myself, but I'd like to know more about you guys. And we then come through to the basics of financial literacy, a couple of basic rules of financial literacy, and how there's certain mindset changes that we need to do to make sure that we are financially sound and our basics are right in the first place. And the earlier we start in our lives, the better this is than making mistakes and realizing late. So these are the four broad areas that we would cover today. Moving on to knowing each other, which is nothing but simply the introduction session. So Zainab, next slide, please. Next. All right. I've given an introduction about myself. You have my email ID there, which talks about where you can get in touch with me. But I'd also want to hear from you and all the participants that are here. If you could introduce yourselves, please feel free to use the chat box, mention your name, your school, which grade you're from, and two other key things that I would like to know. One, of course, is I'm a very travel freak person, so I'd like to know one of the places you'd like to visit or move to. And the other thing is, what is the intention behind attending a session like this? So if you could, in the same message, draw down all these 4 or 5 items and then send it across in the chat box so it's not lost. So I see Furkan, grade 12, PIHS, okay. Rabia Suhail, grade 12. Pakistani school for Jera. I don't see anybody telling me what place they'd like to visit or move and what they would like to take back from their session. So I'm still waiting to hear on that. Asma Waris, grade 11, English language school, Furkan, Canada. Interesting. Nawal, I like your spirit.
Thank you.
What's this thing with Canada?
Yeah, don't know.
I think they don't
For
realize.
once, I've got someone who
believe
says
it's a
London.
very peaceful
On the other
country.
side of the world from where we are.
Someone is there for London.
Tabish feels happy.
Yep.
Eman, grade 12, Pakistani school, Ajman. I'd like to visit Turkey and Tokyo. Want to be financially stable at a young age.
I think this is one of those workshops that attracts a self-selecting crowd that wants to move to places where they will be financially secure. You know, I want to say something like Croatia.
To be fair,
I'm
I
not-
wouldn't link these two things. They're two different things.
Yeah.
And I'll have to probably conduct a separate session on traveling, but not today. We've got Eman, Rabia, Asma, Nawal, Furkan. I'm sure there are other participants. I want to visit Turkey too. Mahanur, first year. Pakistani school, Sharjah. People are pretty good with introductions. When it comes to the final question of what they want to learn or where they want to visit is where they're thinking so much. Turkey. Someone could have been different outside Canada and Turkey. Unless they're all planning to go together. Bahrain,
Yes.
Paris, and France as well. Well, if someone had to ask me this question on introduction, I would simply say, yeah, Neelam, I'm working in this place. This is the school I've been from. And anytime someone would ask me where I would like to visit or move, when it comes to visit, I've got very clear buckets of, I want to complete 30 countries, 35 countries before this timeline, before 2021, 2022. But there's literally no other place I want to move apart from staying in Dubai. Every time I go to a place to visit, I think Dubai is still better. Let me go back. So that's a very difficult question for me. Every time you ask me, I'd say Dubai. Like to visit Turkey and Iceland as well, Africa. All right, I think it's the same couple of people that are replying. I'm not sure if the others are just volunteers or moderators, but I've seen from, well, Eman, Furkan, Rabia, Asma, Maha, Talha. Oh, Talha, grade 12, Pakistan school, Sharjah. I want to visit Turkey. How to spend money correctly, I would like to. So interesting. I think we are up with most of the people that are there. I'm not sure if I'm missing out anyone. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next
Sure.
section, right? All right. So Zainab, if you could please quickly move on to the next slide. I think this is going back.
There's a bit of a lag.
Yep.
Here.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag. All right. So as a basic introduction, I wanted to understand from you guys what did you understand when you were sent out the invite in terms of financial literacy? What do you understand from the terminology financial literacy? I mean, you could use a chat box or you could give your answer here on the call.
Hello.
Yes, Hamza.
Yes, I think financial literacy is having a knowledge to spend your money in the right way, to use your money in the right way. I
Yes.
think
No, you're right.
that's, yeah, because I thought
Is
this
right.
might help me in the future, even though I'm from pre-medical. So, but I think this might help me in the future. So I came here to learn about this.
Which is great. Actually, this session is supposed to break that stereotype about financial literacy is meant only for finance people, because well, at the end of the day, all of us earn and all of us spend. So it's not to do with people from a finance background. But you're absolutely right in terms of understanding this. One of the things that we get confused with, or financial literacy as a term, is often confused with financial education. And that's a bit of a miss. It does not mean the same. Financial education is different from financial literacy. Financial education would be more about your formal courses in finance, in accounting. People like myself who are actually qualified accountants are ones who go through the entire course and study of financial I mean, that comes under the financial education bucket, but that's separate. That's different from financial literacy. When it comes to, so what I would say is financial education is something that's there for finance background people who want to get down into careers in finance and accounting. But financial literacy is the know-how or your confidence based on the basic knowledge that you have of how you would like to use your financial resources, whether be it money or anything that you've invested in terms of assets. So having that spend knowledge is important for a non-financial person as well. It doesn't stand for someone who's an accountant or someone who's in a finance analyst position or a finance field. So there's a very slight difference between the two. With education, it's just the formal coursework. With literacy, is the know-how, the capabilities, or your how you put your knowledge into test when it comes to actual spending on ground. And what we are here to do is not to impart on real financial education courses, but to basically talk about the basic financial literacy that you need to have to make sure that you're managing your finances well. Yeah. Are there any questions between the difference of the two terminologies?
No,
All right.
I don't think so.
So we stay on the slide on financial education and literacy. And before we move on to the next slide, I've got another question, because this is another term that is used incorrectly between the two. What is the difference between financial freedom and financial confidence? Financial freedom, it's there in the terminology, but I'd like someone to put down their thoughts on financial freedom versus financial confidence. Again, it's a very
I think
word.
financial freedom will be like when you have enough to spend to like for enough
Yeah.
financial investments, or like having enough to live the life that you want. Like enough to spend extra is
Yeah.
like if you're gonna spend something on it, so you won't be like you're running low on
Yeah.
something on your finances.
Yeah. What do you understand from financial confidence?
Talha also has his hand up actually.
Actually, I want to say that I think financial literacy is being independent, like not depending on your parents or someone for money you want to use. So I think, and I don't know much
Yeah,
about
that's more
financial
around financial
confidence.
freedom. Yes.
Yeah.
I think Zainab, if you could switch on to the next slide. Yeah. So, speaking of financial confidence, it is the state in which I am in. I need to have confidence in myself before making a decision. And so that is a different concept compared to financial freedom or financial independence. Now, financial freedom and independence are terminologies that are used interchangeably, one for the other. And what financial confidence is my state of mind in which I use my logic, my education, my knowledge that I have of how I would like to process financial resources that I have. Whereas my financial freedom or independence is that I have enough money to not just cover my living, um, but also, I mean, it's basically a cycle, right? If I have financial freedom or if I've got financial independence, my financial confidence also grows. And if I don't have financial freedom, then it's very difficult to correlate this to the confidence I have in terms of investment. Now, with financial freedom and independence, it could be a temporary state. It could be for a limited period of time that I may have the money, and so I'm financially freedom and independent. I'm like Hamza said, like Talha said, I'm not independent. I'm not dependent on my parents. I'm not dependent on any other sources of income than my own. Um, and financial freedom or independence would be that I'm able to manage my current level of living or standard of living without having any dependencies. But again, financial independence or freedom could be for a temporary period. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be there all the time unless you're managing your finances properly. However, financial confidence could be for a longer period of time, because over the years, the more financial freedom you have, you might be increasing the level of financial confidence you have in investing and doing things. One of the other things that we've seen with financial confidence is that the more you've been able to invest by experience and see returns or losses, you are more financially confident in making decisions about where you need to place your money. So again, these are terminologies that are very finance driven, but they need to be used in the right context when it comes to wealth freedom and independence. Those could be used interchangeably, but financial confidence is slightly different. And it does work like a cycle between the two of them. They are linked to each other, but they're two different concepts per se in terms of terminology. Am I clear with this? Because I wanted to clear out these basic concepts before we jump into the actual topics. One was financial education versus literacy, and the other was financial freedom versus confidence. Are there any questions on this before we move on to the next?
No,
No. All right. I'm going to move to the next section, which is actually about the topic that we are discussing here. So, Zainab, if you could move on to the next slide. All right. So, what I would quickly request all of you is to go on to this poll link that's given on the slide. Zainab, is it possible to put it down on the chat as well?
I'll do that really quickly. Just a second.
Thank you, Bushra. So this is just basic questions, and I would need to understand my audience, whether you guys have actually been involved in such workshops. Have you ever used credit cards? Have you used debit cards? Do you understand what's a supplementary card? So those sort of basic things. If you could go on to the poll and quickly answer the questions, it's going to just give me a quick graph of the kind of participants and audience we have.
It says your presenter will start the poll soon. Stay tuned.
Okay, let me check where this is.
So I think there should be a play button, or you should have a controller console.
Yes, I'm trying to go to that link and start. Hey, Bushra, sorry, I'm really very unfamiliar with this one, but I've clicked on the one that says play while I'm on the direct poll page. So does that start off
I
the
think
session?
so,
Could you
yes.
please
It
check?
just started for me. If everyone follows the link.
Sir, we did get one question, and then they say, thank you for your vote. Stay tuned for the next question.
Then you have to go to the next question. Yes, that's how it goes.
All right. So has everyone answered the first before I move on to the next?
I have not, and I have a question. It says, are you a finance student or professional? Yes, no.
Yeah.
So when do I click, are you a finance student or professional? Okay, yes, I have answered.
Now you're good.
All right. I see. Well, this is interesting. So 10 of them with a no and 3 of them with a yes. I'm going to move on to the next question. Are you able to see the second question?
I am.
Okay. How would you scale your personal finance management on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being least and 10 being excellent? So I've seen 6 votes, 7, 8, 9, 10. That was quick. 11, 12. All right. So I've got one who thinks it's poor, one who's less than average, 9 who think it's average or okay, and 2 of them who say good or excellent. I would imagine they are one of the finance professionals in question 1. All right. Since we've already spoken about the next question now, I would expect this to be a yes for everyone. Do you know the difference between financial education and financial literacy? And I still see someone who said a no, and I'd be interested to know who this is who says a no now. But we've got 8 on 10 who say yes and 2 who say no. We've got the next question, which talks about, do you have a personal debit account, a supplementary debit or credit card, any of these things? Wow. So, well, we've got 4 of them who say yes, 10 of them who say a no. We've got the next question, which says, do you check your bill details before making payments?
It's an interesting question. So I go for the direct debit, doesn't really see what's happening.
And I could see 10 for a yes, 4 for a no. And if I was answering this question, I would have a no, unfortunately. Even if I'm from a financial background, it's one of the bad habits I have, and I've suffered quite a bit on this, but I'll talk about this later. Moving on to the next question. Do you know what is a credit rating report? Have you extracted one? Have you seen one? Could be your parents, if not yours. So we've got 11 votes here, of which 8 of them say a no, and I'm not surprised because it's more of someone from a financial background would probably understand this better. But we do have 3 who say a yes. And then I think that's the end of the questions that I had, because I just wanted to get an understanding of the kind of audience that we have. So I'm just going to quickly run through all of them again. The first one was, are you a finance student or professional? We had, well, 10 out of 13 who said a no, 3 who said a yes. In terms of knowing personal finance management on a scale of 1 to 10, we had 9 of them who said average, 2 who said below average, and 2 who said the excellent skills. Difference between financial education and literacy, out of the 12, we had 10 who said a yes. Do you have a personal debit card, supplementary account, or credit card? We have 4 who said a yes, 10 who said a no. Do you check bills before paying? Well, 10 who said a yes and 4 who had a no. And then we spoke about credit rating reports and whether we've ever extracted or seen one. Of course, 4 who said a yes and 10 who said a no. I'm going to just save these answers for my reference later on. But this just gives me a quick insight into what are the areas that we cover, which might need a bit more detail, but also a better understanding in terms of people who are coming from a non-finance background. So that's with the poll link. Now, before we jump onto the actual topic, I just wanted to clarify, when it comes to financial literacy, we've actually broken this down into 4 broad headings. But what you would see here is just 3 of them, because the 4th one is actually something that I would probably discuss in more detail at a corporate level than an individual level. So I will, while I go through it, I would then speak of what the 4th one is before we wrap up the session. And I see a message from Saima saying, switch on your cameras. I want to take one picture. So I would quickly do that.
Miss Sam is actually a teacher who's very enthusiastically supporting all our workshops. So
looks like.
Thank you, Bushra. Thank you.
That's all right. Thank you. All right. Zainab, quickly, can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. So this is just talking about the basic rules of being financially sound. And like I said, we've split it into 3 sections. These are not based on any theories. These are based on more of basic knowledge plus personal experience that comes from myself. I'm sure a lot of us have different sort of experiences. But what we've tried to put together is a bit on the basic knowledge from a theoretical point of view, but more of what you can do practically when it comes to managing your finances. This session is not talking about how you make big investments, make big money and get it back. It's just about how you're managing your basic financial state, at least for as an individual, as a family, and just within yourself to make sure that you're sound more than you're wealthy or rich. So that's a basic fine line between where the topic would be for today and versus I'm just setting expectations around what the discussions would be like. So it'll be very individualized. Now, one of the 4 areas when it comes to financial literacy is budgeting and saving. And we often use those terms interchangeably because in simple terms, when we talk about maths, we are talking about, well, you've got an income and then you've got a spending and then you've got net that gets saved with you. Now, whether you save it or whether you use it or whether you keep it aside for your own personal uses, at the end of the day, what's important is one of the basic concepts is you need to first make sure that you're not overspending on what you're earning. That's a basic or a miscalculation with a lot of individuals, because with credit cards these days, we tend to spend more than we actually earn every month. And a basic way I'm saying, wherein you're working, you're getting a set source of income, a set source of salary. And we've always got this mindset that, well, it's on my credit card and I'm going to pay it up next month, but it becomes a habit. And it's very important to, for one, sit down and track for a month, 2 months, 3 months on a simple Excel report of this is my salary minus these are the expenses that I'm doing. Because most of the people I know, very people years into working, people having families, are usually having more debts than they have actual income or actual assets with them. So, and that's a very risky area for you if you want to become A, financially sound, but B, tomorrow if you're planning to invest in something, if you do not develop this habit now, you will not be suddenly able to save something when you plan to invest in a house or in stocks or in markets and those kind of things. So these sort of basic, not savings, I would say managing your finances start as early as maybe you're in 9 and 10 and 11, or as soon as you pass high school and you would start earning. So your habits will develop now. They will not change or develop later down the years. If I'm earning 2000 dirhams a month, I need to make sure my spending is within 2000 dirhams. If I'm earning 10,000, then I may probably have the scope of pitching in my needs and my wants further. But if you're earning 2000 and then you're spending more than 2000, there's a problem. And when I say a problem, I'm not saying it's a habitual problem, but you either need to change your habit and check what you're spending on, or if everything that you're spending you believe is a need than a want, then you need to find ways of sourcing or increasing your income. So these are the only two ways you'll be able, because there's a plus, which is an income, and then there's a minus, which is an expense. So either you reduce your minus or you increase your income. Now, at this stage, you might have very limited ways of increasing your income. So I would imagine your main focus would be reducing your outgoing expenses. So that's the basic. You've got a plus, which is a salary, then you've got your expenses, you've got net saving. Now, each one of us know ourselves and we know where we stand when it comes to spending. Are we an overspender? Are we a saver? Or are we net zero at the end of the month? Right? And if I was to ask this question, I'm not sure how many of you would say you're a saver, but I was pathetic with this in the beginning. I was not an overspender, but I was not a saver either. I was, whatever came in has to go out and you need to finish that off. That was me over the month. And it doesn't even have to start at the point where you start earning. I'm going to go back to a much younger age where I would get pocket money from my parents and I would make sure by my next pocket money, this one is spent, unless I really need something and I need to collect money. And that's how early you'll be able to find out which bucket do you fall in. What's important in the beginning is, of course, self-awareness. You need to know where you fall, which bucket do you fall in. If you're not going to understand this, am I an overspender? Am I an underspender? You will never be able to change your habits. So that identification is important. And one of the basics ways to do this is how I've done it is I would maintain a simple Excel and find out this is what went in and this is what went out at that stage. Today, I still follow that Excel for my personal expenses, but understand yourself and try to change those habits. So it starts off with knowing how to maintain that, knowing how to understand where you fall. Now, couple of things that come under the budgeting or the saving bucket of discussion. First, that you would understand from here is stop living paycheck to paycheck. What that simply means is if I earn 2000 dirhams, I don't have to spend 2000 dirhams and be nil at the end of the month. Because today I might think I'm a kid, I don't need to invest so much. My parents are there, I could be dependent. But tomorrow, when I want to personally invest, the point of changing that habit will become very difficult. Because I'm prone to spending what I get, even when I start earning a very big amount, I might become a manager and I might earn 20,000 a month, I would be spending that 20,000 a month. Because we all tend to increase our spending because I can afford more. And that's when you start living paycheck to paycheck. It's a risky situation because God forbid there's an emergency, you will not have something to fall back on. And change of habits take time. They don't happen overnight. So you need to start now to make sure your habits develop in that direction if you want to invest and save money. Yeah. One of the other things that we tend to, mismanage is the need for an item or the want for an item. Now that will differ for everyone, but every time you list down the expenses you do for the month, it's important to identify how much of it is a need, absolute necessity for survival, and how much of it is a want. You would want it, but you wouldn't die without it, or it's not like you wouldn't survive without it. What we tend to do is, and it's very normal, is we classify most of what we have as a need than a want. This is important, and this is important, and this is important. But when you start doing your Excels, when you start putting down, this is what I'm getting in as an income, this is what is going out. Between what is going out, you need to classify your need and want so that the following month or the coming months, you're able to pitch yourself down on your wants and you're putting yourself only on your needs. Now, that does not mean that you will stop spending on your wants, but it just means that you've got to reduce it to the extent that you want to save. So, for example, in a month, I could be spending, I'm a person who likes going movies, I'm a person who likes traveling, I'm a person who likes taking my family out for dinner. But I know if I can opt to do it every week. I can opt to do it once in 2 weeks. I could opt to do it once in a month. So it's really my choice. Now, what I have done when it comes to my family is once in a month, which is one of the weekends, we go out for dinner. One of the weekends, we go for a movie. One of the weekends, I know there's something else as an activity that I want to do, but I don't want to fix something on a weekly basis. In any case, you do anything every week, it's going to get boring anyway. So it actually keeps the charm, but you also manage your finances that way. So what I'm trying to say is you do not limit or stop yourself from your wants, no, but you've got to limit yourself if you want to develop the habit of saving money or saving financial resources in any form to be able to be financially sound, financially confident, or financially being able to invest later on in life. It starts now. It doesn't start when you start earning, when you get a bigger salary. Doesn't happen then. One of the other basic things, and I've spoken about this earlier, is you learn Excel. And when I say learn Excel, it's basic Excel. You need to know, it's a very good tool. You don't need to know big softwares that calculate your budgeting. There are a lot of applications you can use to manage this on your phone if you want. But personally, I do not use any application, so I can't recommend at this point, but it's easily found on Google. However, what I still use, and if you ask me in the last 4 years, I still have a monthly Excel of what I earned and what I spent and what got saved in my pool of money that I had. And it's a good reference because every time I go back to that running Excel sheet that I have, in one of the months I wanted to see how much did I spend on electricity in the last 3 years, I would filter out and I know how much I've spent. How much have I spent on telephone expenses? I know this is how much I've spent. So it's always handy to have it. I do sit once in a month with my brothers to put down those Excel so that we have a track of everything in one place, and then we refer to it every month at the end of every month. So every time my salary comes in, the first thing I do is I update my Excel, because over the months I've spent on certain basic items for the house. It gives you a good indication, right? One of the other ways of managing budget, savings, or income, and this is more to do with the income than the saving part, is to increase your sources of income. Now, at this stage where you are, you could be grade 9 or 10 or 12 or 13 students. You are not working individuals. That doesn't limit your source of income. And when I say increase your income and be confident to ask, I don't mean you ask your parents for more source of pocket money from them or spending money from them. What I mean is, in your capacity, if you really want to start earning, a lot of us are good in studies or teaching, could go in for personal tutoring to students. Now, I'm going to minus the COVID situation. I'm talking about a very generic, normal situation that we would have been in. That is just one of the ways you do get pocket money. But in the bigger picture, if I have to take a step up, and for your future, if I need to talk about and be confident to ask, is today, if you're doing well with your education, with the way you are presenting yourselves, you will be more confident to ask when you get down into the work industries. A lot of us struggle to negotiate when it comes to going down into an interview and asking for what I think my worth should be when I'm starting off. And I'm not saying if I start off as an accountant, I'm going to ask for a manager salary. But even as an accountant, sometimes when you go into markets, you might feel you're exploited with the kind of offers that are made. And the only time you'll be confident is when you're confident about yourselves. I know it's a tough decision. Sometimes you might have to, well, I wanted this as an income. I might have to agree at a slightly lower income or a paycheck that they're ready to give me. But there is a line that you need to draw as an individual that beyond this is not something that I would accept. And you will be able to draw that line if you are confident about yourself and if you know that this is basic worth. I can't afford to be lower than this market. And I'm sure it's not going to be lower than what's there in the market. But that's where you capture your first step when you go into asking for or negotiating for an income. Now, negotiating skills on job offers is a whole different topic altogether. But what I'm saying right now is that sets the tone for you because you start off as your first there. The other thing is check bills and invoices. This is a habit that I'm still working on for myself, even after years. Every time there's a bill in a restaurant, every time there's a bill, even an Etisalat bill that I receive online, a Diva bill that I receive online, make sure you learn to read the bill. And when I say read, understand the different components in the bill. Every time I get a bill at the restaurant, I had the habit of not looking at the bill because it's a short bill, 4-5 items, I'd make sense, and I'd go ahead and pay the bill. And every time I go out in a group with my friends, one of my friends has this habit of going through every item in the bill and actually looking back at the menu and making sure we are charged right. These are the things we ordered. This is what is being charged. Very often you would have water is kept on the table, so they've charged it, but you haven't opened and used it. They could have quantities too for something that I've ordered one. Sometimes you could have ordered something, canceled it, but it's not canceled in the bill. Sometimes you have used an entertainer voucher, but it's not deducted in the bill. So these are the sort of things I was very careless about. I still am, and I don't feel ashamed to say this, but I'm still learning. But this is something you need to develop as a habit from the beginning. I know people who are a bit ashamed when it comes to, well, who's going to check and read all the bill, etc. Just put in your credit card, give it off. I've seen my parents do that a lot of times. But I think that's one of the habits we need to change. And it's not about you would save 5 dirhams there because you checked your bill. It's also about, well, you make sure that you're paying for what you use. That 5 dirhams, or whether it's a 50 dirham you save, or whether it's 100 dirham, it's not about the materiality of the money. It's about you building that habit to check stuff, to understand stuff before you make a payment. Today it's a small bill. Tomorrow you might be doing a house mortgage. And if you're not a person who likes to understand the details, you will not realize where the bank is charging you what and what's beneficial for you and what is actually beneficial for the bank, but a drawback for you. So today I am talking about a bill. Tomorrow that habit will develop when I'm going to purchase a house or get a loan. What are the different hidden charges that a bank has when they're giving me a loan? Because they would sell it to me very nicely in the beginning. And over the next couple of months, they would come back to me, well, when you signed off the loan contract, these are the small terms and conditions that you haven't read. So now I've tend to develop that habit of whether on a small scale, check your bills, or whether there are bigger contracts that you sign, you check every hook and corner of that page of what is mentioned there. So again, that habit developed from now, and it would remain for the rest of your life with you. So if you don't have that habit, make sure you have that habit. If you see your parents paying bills, take a few minutes. You could ask the waiter to step out and say, well, I need a couple of more minutes. We'll get back to you. Check that and do it for your parents if they don't do it. It does make a difference. Yeah. So that's one of the things. The other item that talks about buy vouchers. Now, I'm not mandating everyone to buy vouchers. But what I'm saying is one of the very common things back in Dubai that we see is you have your entertainer booklets where you've got buy one, get one free. You've got your HSBC booklets. Some of us use credit cards. We get, like how we have for airlines, we've got air miles. For credit cards also, we get miles where you can exchange it in certain banks for vouchers of certain outlets or brands. Keep your eyes open for it. And if you believe that, for example, when I study my spending sometimes in the Excel sheet, I do find out that I spend a lot on food and on eating outside and dining outside, not just as an individual, but well, with family, with friends. Then one of the things I do tend to do is then I would rather find out on these vouchers, buy them, and I find using them more beneficial than actually spending for my pocket. Because if I have the habit of dining outside every weekend, makes it 4 times a month, does it become more beneficial that I go directly to a restaurant? Or do I buy a voucher booklet for the whole year that covers most of the restaurants I go to and take benefit from there? These are very small things that we tend to overlook. But one of the first things that you do when you do an analysis on your spending habit is you see where do you spend the most. It could be a need, it could be a want. And you've got to find a better way of, you could still continue spending, it could be a need, but then maybe do it in a more reasonable manner or find ways of having that funded more better than how you're funding it now simply by paying out of your pocket. So again, that's a very small area, often overlooked. But if I start calculating in the year how much I spend over how much I would have spent if I was using a voucher, it does make a good amount of money. So food was just an example. You could be someone who likes to spend on certain movie tickets, then you know there are certain credit cards that give you those offers. You could be someone who likes to spend on shopping, then you know there are other different set of voucher booklets that you have. So you need to analyze your spending and where you spend most to then find out how do I spend better. So then what I'm trying to say is you don't stop your spending, you find a better way of funding it. Yeah. Then you've got the concept of avoiding delay fines. Now, when I talk about delay fines, I'm not talking about your car fines or your RTA fines and those sort of things. I'm referring to every time now, all of you, even though you may not have a credit card, I'm sure you understand that there's a monthly interest that gets charged if you have a balance pending to be paid. And the more delay you do, the more interest you have. Sometimes you do have a late payment fees attached to it. So these are the kind of things you'll have to keep a track of. in terms of date. Again, not with my personal experience, I use very limited credit card, but with my father, I did see him panic around the time of the month where he knew every 25th I had a card payment date and I need to make sure all my different credit cards are paid, or I have a late penalty fees, or I have an extra interest. So keeping track of those is difficult. I personally, my way of managing it is I use minimum on credit card. I always use my debit card because I'm very bad at remembering this. But if you are a person who tends to use the credit card, set up your reminders on your phone. A lot of applications of those banks give you reminders. But also one of the things that we do make sure is, as an individual, we should, is you could, if you're confident on your spend, set up auto deductions on your account. So basically on the 25th or the 24th, whatever date you set up with the bank, automatically from your salary account, that amount of payment to the credit card would be deducted and transferred. So you don't have to remember. Now, it depends. Someone like me does not like to set up an auto deduction. I prefer if it's on the 25th, on the 24th, I check my credit card. What are the items that have been charged? Yes, I agree with them. And then I initiate the transfer in the same application. But some of us are confident because, well, our credit card limit is small. I know what I've spent. If you spent only 2-3 items, you know at the back of your mind for the month, this is what I was expecting. And then I have already put in an auto debit from my salary account. So you would function differently. I do it different, but this is just one of the options that you can explore to avoid going into a situation where you have an additional cost of late payment fines. Then you've got 2 other items under this. One of them is your monthly spend limits or your daily spend limits. Now, this is not from a saving perspective. This is more from a security perspective. Any debit card that you have, any credit card that you have, there is always a maximum limit of spend on it. That's one thing. But then there is also a monthly limit or a daily spend limit that is attached to it, or you can attach to it. So I could have a credit card, which is 10,000 dirhams a month is a limit, but I've attached a daily spend limit of 1,000. So in a day, I can't do a purchase of more than 1,000. It's just more safe and secure because God forbid the credit card gets lost and used, the maximum risk you have would be up to 1,000 dirhams. No one would be able to charge up to 10,000 dirhams, which is the limit. So there is a very difference between the limit of the card and the daily limit that you set, which often, if you do not set a daily limit, it could be the same as the limit of the card, which is a big amount again. So that's from a security perspective. That's not something I would say that would help you save. It could help you budget because you know your maximum that you're allowing on the card is 10,000 or 5,000. And one of the last items under the heading of income and saving is your supplementary cards. Now, there are 2 different kind of supplementary cards that we have. One of them is your supplementary credit card. One of them is your supplementary debit card. Now, your supplementary credit card works pretty much like your normal credit cards, where there's a limit, there's a maximum that you can spend, and then you pay it off at the end of the month, along with interest if you're using it for a couple of months. When you say supplementary, what we need to bear in mind is most of the banks, they allow you to have additional credit cards under the same bank account. So I could have a credit card and I would want to have an additional credit card for my mom. So I go into a bank as a main account holder, I apply for it, I give it to her, and I put in a limit for her card, which could be different from the limit that I have. And a supplementary debit card would be linked to my salary account or my debit account where there is money. So she can spend up to whatever money is there in my account, unless I set up a spend limit. So either of the cards would have a limit, but what happens is, again, the moment you put down a limit, you're limiting your risk in case it gets lost, it gets stolen, or I could have a kid and I don't want that kid to spend more than 1,000 a month on his card for whatever that he wants to spend, then I limit it to that. A supplementary card holder, of course, will not be able to see my main account details. I mean, that is one of the first few questions when I started my supplementary account is what I asked. But you will be able to make life a lot easier for yourself. And I'll give you an example. My parents had the habit of going for grocery every weekend. And I had to go with them every time because I would want to charge it on my debit card. And I could have given my debit card these days. They don't take signature. It just takes a tap. But I still had to go with them. With the use of a supplementary card that I've given them, I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, they go a couple of times in a week now. They do not need me. I do get the message of what they are spending on, but it saves a lot of hassle for them to wait for me to get done with my work, to find a Friday where I'm free, to find a day where the car is available. Then all of us go together. I'm a person who hates, going for groceries, unfortunately. And then I'll be sitting there out in the car waiting for them to get done. So it avoids a lot of different hassles. It's not from just a card perspective, but from a practical and administrative perspective also. I've made my life easy and made their lives easy. So these are the kind of key practical things when it comes to budgeting, saving, cards, spending. And that's just one of the three parts of financial literacy that we've covered. I did see in the chat box where someone mentioned Finlect is an app which is currently used for iOS and helps you track your spending and other personal finances, but it's very UAE based. I did not know on this, but I will definitely take a note and try this because I have not tried finance applications. I did note on Zubair saying that I need to be a bit more slow for everyone to grasp. And I tend to go fast. I know I have that habit. I haven't seen any specific questions on the items that we've covered right now. And I can imagine supplementary cards, credit or debit card could be a new concept, but it's very common because I'm sure you've seen with your parents. Are there any specific questions on this first section of financial literacy?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, Hamza.
I just need to know because I'm not into so much I don't know the difference between credit card and debit card. Sorry for that because really don't know the difference between them. I never used them. So
Yeah, yep. Which is no issues. I'm not surprised actually. Okay, so every time you go into a bank, or the first time when you start working and you would go into a bank to apply for your bank account where your salary would be deposited. So when you've got your salary, one of the things that they would give you is your ATM card. I'm sure you have heard this. That is your debit card. That already has money in it as long as you are getting your salary into your account. So once you open a salary account, a debit card is issued to you, an ATM card is issued to you. Let's say your salary comes on the 25th of every month. Then after the 25th of every month, that technically or hypothetically or virtually, you can say, the card has the money that comes into your salary account. You could go into any ATM machine, you could withdraw that cash fully, partially, depending on what limits you've set for your bank account. So that's basically a debit card has the money, has your money in it. A credit card is where it's sort of in simple terms a loan. So once you have a debit card, you could go back to the same, and you've got a salary account. You could go back to the same bank, or you could have a credit card in another bank where you could apply for a credit card. They will ask for your salary statement or your salary certificate. They would want to look at your bank statement that every month, how much do you have money left at the end of the month, or do you spend fully? And basis that, you can get a credit card, which means you can spend. A credit card will not have your money in it. It is almost like a loan. So you're spending, and then you would be paying it back by the end of the month. So again, from a look perspective, it looks a debit card and a credit card look very same. There's not much of a difference. But a debit card is actually the one that's linked to the amount that's there in your account. And a credit card is where a bank will give you a limit up to which you can spend during the month. And once you spend at the end of the month, you need to pay them back. So you use it first, and then you've paid it back. Whereas in a debit card, you have the money and only then can you spend it. I've tried to make it as simple because I usually tend to go.
Yeah, it's okay. It's simple. Yeah, I understood.
Yeah.
So like,
And I'm sure, I mean, if you talk to your
in
parents,
credit card there is limit, and it could be more than your salary.
Well, the limit that is given in a credit card is always given to you based on the salary that you have. So the bank will assess what is the maximum limit they can give you. For example, if they know my salary certificate that I submitted to them shows every month I earn 2,000 dirhams, they will never give me a credit card which has a limit of 10,000 or 15,000 dirhams. The amount is not fixed. It depends on the assessment the bank will carry out based on your financial status or your financial income that you have. A lot of banks do give 2 times your salary, 3 times your salary, but there is no hard and fast rule. Every bank has a credit department, and that department decides based on your bank statement or your history of what is a reasonable amount to give to you as a credit limit.
Okay. And debit card is just like having a whole, like if your salary is 10,000 dirhams, so you are having 10,000 dirham in your pocket. And it's more riskier to have, it's more riskier to have that card in your pocket than have a limited finance. Like if you spend 2,000 dirhams a month, the credit card will be like set to the limit of 2,000, and you only spend 2,000. Like credit card helps you save the money, and debit card doesn't. Yes.
It depends how you use it. So I'll give you an example. For example, I earn 10,000 dirhams a month, for example.
Yeah.
And I choose to keep my monthly limit, or my daily extracting limit from ATM to only 1,000 dirhams. So even if I have 10,000 in my account,
yes,
myself or anybody will not be able to take out more than 1,000. So from a security perspective, I have limited my risk. Even if my card gets stolen, I'm going to be spending, as someone might be charging it only for 1,000 dirhams, not more than that. Now, so that's from a security perspective. From a budget and saving perspective, if you ask me, I will always say that a credit card is, for my personal experience or how I use it, it's always a backup. I try not to use the credit card. I try to use money that I only have. If I don't have, you need to limit your spending on luxury items or wants, unless it's a necessary.
Yes.
Yes, so my priority would be always to spend from my debit card, and then if I'm short of funds, I go to my credit card.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I understood.
Yeah, so one of the good things that Zainab's also raised on the chat box, a credit card is a liability to you. You've got to pay it back. It's, in simple terms, it's a loan. In other terms, we call it a debt in financial terms. Whereas a debit card is basically your cash, but instead of carrying all those different notes and cash in your wallet, you're carrying a card. That's the only difference. I hope I've made a basic, clear difference between the two cards. Are there
Yes,
any
yes.
more
Thank you so
questions
much.
on this?
So can we say that the credit card is basically like a loan, something like a
It
loan,
is. It
and the
is.
debit card is just
That's
what
one
you
thing.
have, what is your personal earnings, and then you can spend exact directly from that.
Yes.
Whereas a credit card is going to be what you
Yeah. I
borrow.
mean, the use of debit card would always be after you have money in it. You can't spend it in advance. So it's simply going
Right.
back to the first point that I said, where you have the money, you spend it. You don't have, you don't get to spend it. With credit card, the formula changes. You don't have it, you spend it first, but then you're liable to pay it back. So next month, you're worried that I need to make that payment and my monthly expenses now. But again, a credit card is not a bad thing. This is what I want to emphasize. There are times where parents struggle to use their finances that they have in hand, and they need to rely on a credit card to make sure your fees goes out on time, or make sure the grocery come in on time, because I'm short of funds with my debit card. But the priority always stays with the debit card, I would say, if you want to smartly manage your funds and then move on to the credit card. I am 100% sure all your parents have a debit and a credit card. So post this session, do understand from them, and you could always have a chat and take this further. And I'm sure they'd be happy to know that you know the difference between the two now. But also, you could always have that discussion of, for our family, do we use debit cards more? Do we use credit card more? Is there any particular reason why we rely on credit cards more? Sometimes it's not for the fund. Sometimes we use credit card more because we get points in it. Like for travel, we get air mile points. Some people use credit card for um, swiping and getting grocery points, or the more credit card you use, you get more points, and then you can convert it to vouchers. Now, in certain places where I know I can get points from a credit card, what I do personally is I would go to the grocery or I would go to the cinemas, I would use it, I would get the points. But as soon as I come back home, and I'm saying the same day, I log into my banking application, and from my debit card, I transfer the money and pay it off. I do not wait for the end of the month. So I got my points, I used my credit card, and I paid it off immediately with my debit amount. So that's one smart way of getting the points also, and still keeping a zero balance on my credit card. I see there's another question on credit rating, but this is something I would cover in the next section anyway, so we'll come to that. Any more questions on the income, budget, or saving aspect, or cards for that matter?
Hello. Hello.
Yes.
What a wonderful session here in these ages and time. I just wanted to ask how can we have a check on and control on impulse purchase? Uh, keep a track or things. I mean, with the sales around happening, and how can we keep a track on control impulse? How do you do that? Thank you.
Yeah, so if I get your question correctly, you're talking about how to keep a track of your generic monthly expenses and manage them. So while I was talking in the beginning of the session, I'm talking from my experience. Everyone could, track it differently. Like someone mentioned about the finance application, because all of us are on the phone all the time. So it's easier to quickly log into the phone every time you have a spend. But personally, I do it at the end of the month. What I do is I have an Excel, and there are different tabs for every month. And I know there are some basic expenses, that is your electricity, your Etisalat, Diva, and those kind of bills. Yeah, I've got my income. I know I need to call in for my gas lines, pay off that. Then I have my grocery expenses. So I'll give you an example. When it comes to Etisalat, I know what is the basic package fix that I pay for eLife. And I know maybe 50, 40 dirhams above that if someone does calls to mobiles. But then after that, I know that's a trigger for me that if my bill has to be 550 and it comes around 600, it's all right. It doesn't ring any bells. The moment it crosses 600, I'm a bit concerned. Then I go back into the Etisalat portal. I extract my bill. I check who's made those international calls. There are times where there are chances of incorrect billings. So the whole point of keeping a track of the trend every month is your average spend for every item that you do. That should ring a bell every time it's a weird number, it's too much, or sometimes even if it's too less. Because if it's too less, chances are they've missed out on a charge, which they will charge you next month. So now that's one thing. The other thing is when it comes to groceries, for example, I do have an estimate that I know that every month we are a 5-member family. I believe based on the spend I've done in the last 3 months, 1500 dirhams, for example, is what I would need to get sufficient amount of grocery for the month. I've got a supplementary card, debit card under my name, which is on my mom's name. So I go to the bank. I ask them to prepare something on my mom's name. She signs it off. We put in an application. She's got a card now. Now we as a family call it a grocery card. There is a limit on that card of 1500 dirhams because we agreed this is what is required for the month. She would go in for a grocery and she can go in 100 times in the month. The moment it touches 1500, she will not be able to spend. That's how I have controlled on grocery, or we have agreed to control, because we tend to spend more in those areas. So we know that's how we do it. So there are different ways of how we spend control, but what limit you want to set, that has to be after a discussion you have. For example, if it's for grocery, I would discuss it with my mom. If I'm making a different card for paying my brother's fees, I know exactly how much will be charged for the year. So every month he would go and swipe only for the month. And the moment the year's limit is over, he will not be able to swipe it. So that's how different areas where you set your purchase limits. If you don't set a purchase limit on your card, the bank automatically sets the highest possible limit. And then what happens is first you increase your risk in case the card gets lost. But second, it's also that you will not be able to manage your finances. So as a bare minimum, I would recommend at least once in a month, you sit down and look at your Excel sheet and see what has happened in the different expenses versus last month, not just this month. Now, one of the common questions I get on this is, how would I remember at the end of the month that I've spent this much on electricity, I've spent this much on grocery, I've spent this? Well, how I put down those expenses is I do not have multiple credit cards. I've always had one bank, one credit card, one debit card. So what I do is I make sure that all the spend is on from my credit card. So when I sit to put down my Excel, I open my application, my bank application. I look at all my spends and I start putting them down in Excel. This is grocery, this is electricity, this is whatever sort of expenses I have. So I always fall back on my credit card statement or my debit card statement because it's up to date. And that's not going to be wrong because that's all the money that's gone out. What you will not be able to do, and you always need to bear in mind, if I go and take out cash from my card and then spend it, then yes, I will find it difficult to keep a track. So personally, I don't remember when was the last time I withdrew cash because these days you can at the tap of your card or swipe your card and do all payments. So I make sure I swipe my debit card every time I do a purchase, unless I'm in a very small shop where they expect only cash payment, then I keep a note of it. Otherwise, I don't separately keep a note. I know I'm using my card. End of the month, I take out my statement, and then I start putting down my monthly expenses. So everything is there in the statement. Does that answer your question, Zubair?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. Really helps. It really helps throughout. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Anybody else on this?
Hi, Neelam. Thank you. Not a question, basically a comment.
Yeah.
You talked about savings and having your income and then your expenses. I think in terms of savings, just something that has helped for me is it goes back to what you said about having a habit of saving. So it does not matter how much you start saving from. I am not being very moderate. I'm just giving the fact that I actually started saving from 10 dirhams a month, and this amount reached into thousands just because of this habit of saving. I considered saving as one of the must expenses that I have to do. So saving was a need expense that I have to take out from my income, and that has helped me a lot.
Has to be. I fully agree, Zahid. It could be 2 dirhams when you're small or when you're young and it's never too late. It's at the end of the day, I believe it's a habit you have to develop. And if you are able to develop this now, it's going to go a long way. A long way.
Yes, because I have so many people there. Sorry to interrupt. They always tell me, yes, I will start saving. Come on, who saves 10 dirhams? But it is not about the amount. It is about the habit and getting into the practice of saving, that mindset. Thank you.
Yes, and it becomes very difficult to adopt or to create that mindset a little later in life. Yeah, I'll earn a bit, I'll spend a lot on myself today, and tomorrow I'll start saving. It never happens. It never happens. So if you've started, it's amazing because this is what will help.
Okay, if you don't mind and if you allow, I had a trick when I was kid and I was not earning on how do I learn saving. Before I give it away, no, before I give it away, I just want to check if anybody else in the room has a way of not earning money but practice saving. Anybody who wants to add or share their experience of saving, how do they save that and they don't have any money? I'll count till 3 if anybody wants to speak up. 1.
I do not
Okay.
have any yeah, I do not have any trick or anything, but I just remember that when I was like 10 years old and everything, since then, like whatever money I used to get, even like a 25 fils or a 50 fils or even a 1 dirham, I used to save it like every day and not spend it. And I remember that after like 6 months, I had a trip coming up and I actually paid with that money, I actually paid for my own trip. So I'm like, even if it's 25 fils, it's actually very much worth it once you start saving. That's it.
And also I see there are
Same.
some comments. Just one thing, that when I did not had an income and there was no money involved, my goal used to be that whatever allocation I have from the packet of candies that are assigned to me by my mom, I should be able to make sure that I save at least 1 or 2 of them until I get the next distribution. So that's how I used to save. And then when my parents used to run out of the candies, I used to tell them that, see, I have extra. Do you want to buy from me? So that's how I used to do it.
It looks like you started earning very young.
Yes, I actually started getting very young. I used to go to grocery with my mom. I used to save my money, buy all the candies, come home, sell it to my siblings.
There's a very desi way, there's a very desi terminology that people use, and I'm sure it's not going to be offending to anyone here, but when they say bech ke kha jayega, it reminds me of that. I'm sorry, but that's a good way actually. I could never do something like this with chocolates. Maybe I would have if someone told me then do it with a different thing. Chocolate is something that's a weakness, so there's no way it's being saved anywhere. but it's a good,
Yeah.
it's a good trick. It's a good tactic. I do have one of my cousin's son who is an absolute smart kid. I don't want to use another word. When he's got stuff that his brother needs, and after a couple of uses, he tells his brother, "You buy it from me," and they are small, but it just talks about the mindset. And sometimes we tend to say it's not the right mindset, and don't talk about money. But somewhere I think it also is important that we do talk about money with kids, and that's another item that I've put down in one of the last few sections. But are there? Thanks for your feedback, Zahid. I think this is something that was not under my and uh, mindset of having it this young and in this way, because we always, when we talk about savings, we've always talked about money or resources. So it's a very different way of building the habit without having money involved, which is really nice. Are there any more questions that we have from anyone?
Not a question, just like how you guys were mentioning how you're saving, for someone who doesn't earn and you just have your pocket money and you're like, I want to save, I want to buy this. But every time you just buy something, you often have fives or tens saved. You get them back as change, right? So if you
Yeah,
just start saving with the five, just with the five, or you could start with the
yeah.
coins because you obviously get them and then keep them in a box and you make sure you don't see it all year. You just keep putting in. Do not
It's got to be
see,
those
do not
piggy
open
banks
it.
where you have to break
Yes,
them.
yes. But you don't get them. Today you get boxes where they have screws at the end to just have a peek,
Yes,
which should not be. But if you do that, that can be like an amazing way to just save. You will have no idea how much you have saved, but you definitely know that you're saving, and it'll be a lot at the end.
it
I
will
mean,
be.
that's
It
how
does
I
make a
do
difference.
it.
Yeah, it all does come back to the habit, the mindset. And and this reminds me in the chat box what my brother's written. He would buy something that is weird and not available in the market and sell it for really high prices. And he's done this so many times, and we would be really irritated about the weird stuff we'd find at home. And we would know he's bought it to resell it to some other people who also like weird stuff. I mean, normal people wouldn't buy it, but he had that habit always. And I think we should always encourage these sort of things, because while there are a lot of people who say, well, you shouldn't be talking about money or dealing with money this young, it's a habit that develops, as long as it's in the right way, of course, without any disrespect to anyone. But it is something that needs to be talked of and imbibed from a young age. Um, and I could see now a lot of people writing a lot of things, and I'm glad it's getting more interactive. But I think we are limited on time. We've got another hour and two more sections to cover. We've spoken about budget and savings, and with this, I'm going to call it off to move on to the next slide, which is a bit of a thought process activity. But so that's a quick, straightforward activity, and I'm happy to see responses on the chat box. But depending on the kind of lifestyle you want, so it's not necessary, and I'm not saying if you're maintaining an average lifestyle right now, if you consider it average, but maybe tomorrow you want to live a luxurious life. So that's why the question starts with depending on the lifestyle you want, okay, and exploring the options and expectations. Um, what would you imagine? I'm going to simplify this question a bit. It's a bit more technical the way it's worded on the screen. What is the income that you believe you should be earning to live that luxurious life? And I'm talking about dirhams in monthly, and it could be ranging from anything. Um, and what are the basic expenses you believe you would be doing on a monthly basis? Of course, it could be needs and it could be wants. So it could be, it's not an absolute necessity that you're spending, but generally. So, and you could put in hypothetical numbers. Your numbers don't have to be right or wrong, because you guys may have not gone down into the practical field of how much you will need for grocery, how much you will need for car and expenses. But I'm going to give away 5 minutes for you, if you've got a pen and paper, to put down something, and we would quickly discuss this after the end of the 5 minutes. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do this exercise for myself as well, not based on what I get now, but based on how I would want to see myself in the next couple of months. And, this is how I picture myself, because it's important to have a goal to work back on what you need to start doing now. So I'm going to give away 5 minutes. If there any unclarity with this question, raise your hand right now or ask the question. Otherwise,
Do
I'm going to
we
quickly put it on mute.
do we only mention just the income that we wish to have, or also
Well,
do
the
we
income that you
mention
wish to have, and then roughly what do you think you would be spending on your expenses for the month? And just high level expenses. I'm not saying every nitty gritty of what you would be spending.
yeah.
So, the basic ones that you require. It could be your car, it could be your groceries, it could be your telephone bills, it could be electricity. So these are 4, 5 major ones, but you may want to add a few want that I like traveling or I like,
Definitely.
So I'm just going to give away 5 minutes and then we'll quickly discuss this as a group. I guess we are up on 5 minutes now. I'm not sure how difficult or easy this exercise was for everyone, but I'm sure you would be able to put through some basic and thought process into this. Is there anybody who would like to go ahead first? So much of silence.
I can go, Neelam, if you want.
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm based in London, but where I did like apply the exchange rate to convert into dirhams for you guys. So if I look my monthly expense and income way, so I have the rent commitments, which is somewhere around 5,500 dirhams. Then I have my utilities, which is 1,000 dirhams. Then I have my all the subscription for Netflix, Amazon, LinkedIn, all those pieces. That's around 250 dirhams. Then traveling is again 15 dirhams. Grocery is somewhere around 3,500 dirhams. And then if I'm going for outdoors and dinings and all those pieces, that's around 2,000 dirhams. And then I'm pretty crazy about gamings and everything. So there's a lot of money spent there. So that's somewhere around 300 dirhams. So all it makes in terms of my expenses is 14,000 dirhams. So that's pretty much my like expense base for a month. So since it's COVID, so I can't travel much, but just like to go to a lot of places now. But once it gets there, so I think there would be some bits there. I would put savings of to like somewhere around 500 dirhams or 1,000 dirhams every month just to save for those trips. If I plan to go for a Europe tour or Scotland, or yeah, I want to go to Prague once they open up, but I'll start saving for that one as well. And also, if I need to travel back to Dubai and to Pakistan, so that savings would come as well into this as well. So it's somewhere around 16,000 dirhams is like a monthly expense that would be there. So in terms of my earnings, I could save on top of it somewhere around 6,000 dirhams. So that's pretty much fine for me.
Which is quite good. I was about to come to of this. Do you still manage to save, or are you a paycheck to paycheck? But it looks like you.
No,
you're doing well, fairly well.
So when I started my career, so my mentor told me the first thing is whatever you earn, just at least try not to consider 10% of your income that you have it. Just put it away straight away at the first day in some other bank account. So I maintain multiple bank accounts. There's one bank account, which is my expense bank account. And it gives me a summary what I need to do every month. And there's a bank account I deposit money, and I never look back at it unless I just need for something for my investments or travel or some kind of future commitments that I have for. So that's how I'm managing.
Thank you so much, Tabish. After listening to you, I just have a question. Maybe either you can answer or Neelam can answer. Now, when we start saving, do we have to save only if we want to do something in future? For example, you said for traveling. So do I start saving because I plan to travel 6 months or 9 months or 12 months down the line? Or even if I don't plan anything, I save. And if I do, should there be a difference in the percentage wise that how much, ideally should I save for no reason and how much I save for a reason?
So I think the way I see a couple of things, I do invest. So that's like the first thing, how am I planning to go for it? So it could be stock market, it could be real estate and all those things. So that's where the saving goes. But then sometimes for no reason, I think that comes to a point that if I'm earning enough and I've done with all my wish list, and then there's still some space available, and that's go for no savings. I don't know what I'm doing for it. But otherwise, it's pretty much calculated savings that I'm doing most of the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I'd want to add from a travel perspective, I do believe that one of the main misconceptions, I would say, when it comes to travel is that people think travel is you need to save a lot of money to travel, and believe me, that's not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. It depends on the kind of traveler you are. If you're a person who likes to travel for luxury, for having a luxury holiday, a five-star hotel, and relaxing and having the best of services from the people in the hotel, yes, that requires a lot of money. But if you are traveling for actually visiting places and learning stuff,
Adventure.
I've done this and I'm extremely cheap when it comes to travel, believe me. But the amount of times you see me travel, people think she's got a lot of money. No. But that's again a very different session that I told Bushra. Traveling is a whole different topic that people are interested in terms of how do you manage travel, how do you fund your travels, how regularly you travel. If you're a person who, I've seen a lot of people who say, well, I love traveling, but they don't travel. I love traveling, but I don't have the money. And I do not agree with that statement. It's a different mindset and it requires a change in the mindset to be able to do that because it does give a lot of learning and it's not always about money. So if the aim is for traveling, you want to save, I don't think you need to save a lot. You still do need to save and budget for it, but you don't need to save a lot. I'm a person who, minus the COVID situation, travels every 2 months, 3 months, and my target is every year I need to cover four new places anywhere around the world. But then I have a set, you will not believe, I've been to places with a budget of 1,500 or 2,000 dirhams, and I've done 4 and 5 days there. But there's a very technical way of doing it. You go in groups, you make sure the cost is split, you go for discounted tickets, you take, via flights and transit flights, you plan your holidays on a weekend, you don't use too much of your annual leaves. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it well, but I wouldn't really say you need to save a lot to travel.
Is it my connection or?
No, I think
No,
that's
no, I believe it's technical problem, connectivity problem with man Neelam.
So while she comes back, I see so many messages in the chat. And one point I want to highlight, and maybe Tabish can comment since he has some background, in the consulting and financial literacy. So you need to always split between, financially managing your financials and having an extra income. So if you are earning more, that does not mean that you are financially literate or financially sound. Is it right, Tabish? What is this concept that if I earn more, I think I'll solve everything in this world and I will own the world?
Not necessarily. I have seen people slipping a lot, even they earn a lot. Doesn't really matter because they don't have like discipline, financial discipline, if I say that. I think it's more about knowing what you're earning, what kind of expenses you want to make, and making sure you keep the balance in between. Just like said Neelam in the start, that either you can increase your income base if you think you want to do something more. So sometimes if I have time, I take some of the projects, work on them. That's like an extra savings for me, an extra money that I could use for some of my other stuff that I want to do. Or else you just have manage your expenses in a way. And again, when it comes to, doing your wishes and everything around that, there's a lot of ways to go about it. Just like Neelam said about the traveling, I know how frequently she travels. You have to keep a check on everything. So for example, if I live in UK, there's a perception around, people here wears a branded clothes and, all those branded shopping. But I've seen people here waiting for those days where there are discounts and buying the stuff on that particular date. So they don't even shop entire year. They just wait for the right days, right offers and everything around that. So there's a lot of like discipline. I've seen people around focusing that how to get the best thing at the best time. So it's just like to be aware and proactive about all those things coming your way.
I would love to listen from anyone here in the room. What because I see so many chats and messages in the chat box. If someone can unmute themselves and explain how personally they have brought in discipline when it comes to spending or controlling their wants and just sticking to their needs. Anybody, it doesn't have to be you, it can be someone in your family that you have learned from, because sometimes we learn a lot, not sometimes, always, we learn a lot from others, how they are practicing, behaving, disciplining themselves. So if someone wants to share something interesting, a fact, I would really appreciate it. It will be a learning for me as well.
Yeah, actually, in the comments, people are asking about forex market. So it's it's not like it's usually, what happened. People like confuse it with the bitcoins and other stuff, but in bitcoins, yeah, luck matters sometimes, but in forex market, luck don't matter actually. What matters is that your understanding of the market. You should know how forex market actually work, which is very easy, and any person, any normal person can learn how forex market work and how you can invest in that. So like, I've seen my friend investing in that forex market, and they are earning right now quite amount quite big amount of money from forex market. So it's also a
Right.
very source.
Right, Talha, and thank you for that. It is definitely one of the places where people do make money, but it goes back again to what
Yeah.
our lead Neelam mentioned and what Tabesh highlighted,
Yeah.
that there is a very thin line difference that we need to understand. Is having more money does not mean that we are financially sound. It is again keeping checks and balances on how much you have, how much you spend, where you spend, and how you spend. It is also about having a backup plan, that what your plan is in case things don't go as you are planning them to go. So all of that is also very important and are part of financial literacy. Leave alone the earning more and more part.
Yes, completely agree with you, Zahid. You are absolutely right.
Yes. Anybody else would like to share something, their thoughts on financial literacy and how they have learned from someone else around them? A tip to
Yeah,
for saving? Yes.
I would say that the best thing about financial literacy, which I got, was the want and the need. The point which included the want and need, because I got it from a friend of mine who was like facing some economical and financial problems in his family. So he told me about the want and need stuff. So whenever I got some pocket money from my parents, I just used to like go and check on Amazon's what are the new shirts, the pants, and the watches and everything. I'm a bit of materialistic. So, but now when he gave me the idea of want and need, I'm trying to save money, and Alhamdulillah, I'm saving a lot now. It completely changed my idea and my ideology about money.
uh, that's excellent. And one thing which has helped me, and maybe I will see if someone has if it has helped someone else also, and I would really encourage everyone to participate and mute themselves and speak. uh, Sometimes when you see someone or yourself, you are struggling with in managing your whatever situation it is, the best is you go to someone who is more knowledgeable on that topic and you discuss your problem with them. It goes again to the financial situation as well. If you think you cannot manage your financial situation, there are financial experts, there are financial advisors. You go to them, you tell them, you talk to them that this is my situation, and please help me, and they do develop a plan for you where they clearly help you identify, after listening to you, what your needs are, what your wants are, what is something that you can spend on now, what is something that you can spend on later, what is urgent, what is important, all of that. So all of that helps. It is financial discipline, though it involves money, and when it involves money it becomes sensitive, but it is very much similar to any other topic, any other discipline, that we should not hesitate, we should not shy from actually going to the people who are expert and talking to them. One story about my US trip. So I went to US trip, and believe me, the ticket I got, I did not pay for it. It was 100% from the points I have redeemed on my credit card. So
Wow.
yes, so at the same time, credit card can be bad, it can be good, but you have to know how much your income is, and it always goes back to the basic question: what your income is, what your expenses are, and how do you manage that and keep that buffer which Tabish was referring to, that this is my income, these are my expenses, and this is the extra bucket. So you manage that, and then if you use either the credit card or debit card, it makes no difference. All you need to know is that how you are managing your expenses and what are the benefits in it for you. And going back to the point which Neelam mentioned in the beginning, when you go to a restaurant, there is no harm in asking them, checking the bill, asking them if they offer any discount, if the trick of the vouchers, you ask. So if you don't know, you ask. If you don't ask, you lose. So that can also be one of the things that can help you understand the situation more, on where you can save your money and where you can manage your expenses. I think Neelam is back.
Yeah.
And let's see if she's able to add.
Hey Zai, thanks for covering while I was not here. And you guys shouldn't be surprised if this happens. I'm sitting in Pakistan and doing this, so you could imagine on the network, but it just went off. All right, so I'm just going to quickly open my chat box and see. Is everyone able to hear me now?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
I'm not switching on my camera for now. I will do this later because the Wi-Fi network isn't taking that much of a load. But I quickly want to go through the last two sections. They are relatively much shorter to what we were discussing. So are there questions at this stage, or should we quickly move on to the next section?
I think let's move to the next
I think
section.
we should go ahead.
If you all could just give me quickly 2 minutes, I'm going to switch my network onto a different Wi-Fi network and join in with a video call.
Okay, so while Neelam comes back, I'm still waiting for someone to share a tip or a trick that they have learned from someone on saving, or a wise trick. Otherwise, I have so many stories to share. Either I can continue
I
and
want
share
to
my
share
stories.
something.
Yes, please, Hamza.
Hello, sir. Yes. So I heard it from YouTube video a few days back. It was about cars and all, like luxury cars that you can buy for cheap, and like they were old, obviously. So before starting the video, that guy said that nothing is more expensive than cheap luxury. So like he was like, so don't ever buy cheap luxury. Instead of that, you can buy a new one, or like medium one. So the car was all like S class, which are old, and you can buy them for cheap right now because their price has dropped over the years. So we can also share, because the cost of affording them is high, like petrols and all, and sometimes the parts are not available also. So we should also be we should also be careful for the things we are going to buy. Like they should be easy to afford and easy to maintain.
That's correct. And how I see it, as rather than easy to afford and easy to maintain and easy to buy,
Yes.
one way of looking at your expenses is actually think of everything that your investment that even talking about grocery. I think Neelam is back, so let's go to her.
Yep.
Maybe she has something, and then I can share my stories later.
Yep.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Zayed. So I'm quickly moving on to the second section that we'll talk about. So we've spoken about budget, we've spoken about income and savings and that aspect. But now we are quickly moving on to the credit aspect. We were talking about credit cards. We all understand what a credit card is. It doesn't have money in it. There's a limit to which you can spend and then pay it back when you have the cash or the funds to pay it back from your salary account or your debit cards. So a couple of things that we need to keep in mind when we speak of credit card. First is good debt versus bad debt. One of the common misconceptions we have is that a credit card is a bad thing or a debt is a bad thing. A debt is not necessarily a bad thing. Yes, it is talking about liabilities, but sometimes we go into a debt to create a long-term sustainable source of income. So a very good example is I would want to get a house and I would have to mortgage it. I have an amount available to do a down payment of whatever the value of the house is. So 20%, 30% of the amount, and the remaining I will have to pay in monthly installments. So again, I am getting into a debt, yes, because I'm taking a loan. It's against my name. It will be there in my records that I have a loan to pay out as a liability. But 5 years down the lane, I would have paid off the loan, or 10 years down the lane, I would have paid off the loan and created an asset for myself, a resource for myself, something under my name. It's an investment for myself. What a bad debt is, so I'm just trying to differentiate between a good debt and a bad debt. A bad debt is I start using my credit card a lot for things like going for movies, shopping, food, because these are not needs. These are luxury items. These are want. And I could control, but I go ahead with spending on them. And they do not generate, or they are not letting me get a good resource at the end of the process. At the end of the spending, yes, I will feel good right now, but at the end of the month, I'll have to pay back that money without getting anything under my name. Whereas in a house loan or a house mortgage, it's just simpler to call it a house loan. At the end of the loan, at least the house is mine. So there's a very fine difference between a good debt and a bad debt. You need to understand the difference to be able to make a decision of whether I should go get into this debt, whether I should take this loan or not. Is it giving you a benefit in the long run in terms of giving you a resource or an asset, or is it a temporary pleasure that I'm satisfying now, but it's not giving me anything at the end of the day except for that satisfaction of having a good food, shopping, and those sort of things. One of the very fine examples of a good debt versus a bad debt is in US, where there is a concept of school loans. So what happens is a lot of time parents do take up a good substantial amount and student loans where students come in, they are given a loan. And so from the time you start working in a university, you're not even start, so there's no source of income for you, but you already have a loan under your name. It's a very common concept there. And the intention is that once the student gets an internship, they get a paid internship, they get a job. Once they get a job, the student will be paying back the loan. So sometimes the decision, well, more often, the decision of getting the student loan might be of the parent, with the student eventually paying it off in the next couple of years. And that's a bit tricky because sometimes a parent has a choice between a very good university, so a very big loan that they need, or an average university, an average or low amount of loan that they need. Now, a parent could have taken a decision of a very big loan because they thought I would want to give the best of education to my kid. And then the kid spends next couple of years after getting a job paying off that loan. So they don't really get anything in hand. Whereas sometimes we do have students who come back and say, well, if I was given the option, I would have gone for a good university, maybe not for the best of universities. I would have done my bachelor's in that university. And once I start earning, I pay off those student loans. And then I go for an expensive university for my master's. So a decision could have been slightly different if the discussion was involving the kid or the student. And very often what we see back at homes is these sort of decisions at this age is done by parents. A lot of parents do not like to or do not think that their kid is financially educated or literate enough to be discussing this and giving their opinion on this decision when the decision is being made. So when we talk about good debt and bad debt, it's important for us to know the difference. So we make sure we get involved in a good debt rather than a bad debt. So this generic statement of a credit card or a loan is bad, I don't believe is right. It could be good depending on the purpose that you're taking this for. Yeah, so that's one. The other thing is, we've spoken about this, credit cards are a very dangerous tool because when you have a limit of spending, you tend to spend, assuming that next month when I have the money, I'll pay it off. So we've got to be very careful here in terms of, I understand if it's a need or a want and spend accordingly. So if it's a need, yes, then there's no question and I'm short of funds otherwise. But if it's a want, I'm sure you could limit yourself on that spend unless you really have the luxury of it. So it is dangerous because it's technically the bank has given you, well, a card, which is in other terms cash, spend it and then pay it back later on. Now, having a dinner out with a family could be a luxury for some people. And if you ask me today, after so many years of now stabilizing my income a bit more, I could say, well, I need to have a family dinner at least once in a month. So a need doesn't necessarily mean that I wouldn't survive without it, but it's in a top range of my wants. It's between the need and the want. So it's a more priority want I would want to do than should I want to spend on my personal shopping? No, I prefer to spend on a family dinner than a personal shopping because it impacts more people that it gives me a personal satisfaction. So I think it depends. A need and a want for a person will not be the same. And it differs from person to person. And similarly, now I'm a person who's got my parents with me, my brothers with me. I do not have a family in terms of a husband, a kid. So for me, a need is not school fees. But for you as a parent, school fees is a need. So the list of the need and the want will always differ from person to person. And it could also differ for two people in the same family. My list of need and want is different from what my brother has because he might still be studying. He needs to pay his university fees. He needs to pay his conveyance to university and so on and so forth. So to be able to manage your finances, I'm still going to reiterate my point that I initially said. You need to understand your bucket of need and wants. Not generally what is a need and a want. There is no general listing of a need and a want. Third item that's mentioned here, I will come back to this. So I'm skipping this for the fourth last item first. your card miles, and we've discussed this again earlier. If you have credit cards, if your parents have credit card, very often a lot of us, even I, was not aware for a good while that there are miles that we collect on this, and we can exchange it for vouchers. Or sometimes what you can do is, for example, I have 2000 miles or 2000 points in my credit card. We have those, we can pay back our credit card dues with it. So I could have a credit card bill outstanding for 3000 dirhams, and I could use my points of 2000 air miles or points to pay off partially that amount of due. A lot of us do not know this, that it is getting collected in the background. And what happens is it has a time period, a lifetime, and after 6 months or 12 months, those points lapse and they're not going to inform you. So you missed out converting it to a voucher, or you missed out using it to pay off your credit card bills. You can partially pay them off. I often use it for paying off my credit card balances. I don't usually convert it to vouchers and then take it ahead. But a lot of people use those points to get vouchers online for the restaurants. They give you a list of restaurants or shopping or entertainment, and they use it. So I'm sure all your parents do have credit cards. Do ask the question that, does your credit card give points? Are you aware about this? Have you ever asked? And if you've never asked, please go ahead and ask the bank of these options. Sometimes the same bank could have different kinds of credit cards, and some of them are travel cards. Some of them are specifically for grocery, that if you do grocery on these cards, we give you points. So you could have different options, and maybe you are using something that's not suitable for your finances, but there is another credit card with that bank, with the same bank, which is more suitable. But again, to go back to the bank, you need to first understand, what do you spend more on? If you spend more on grocery, you would want to get a card which is beneficial for grocery. If you spend more on travel like I do have a travel card, or a card which has less foreign currency changes every time I travel. If you spend on air miles, there are cards that are good for travel and booking tickets. So you need to, again, self-awareness is most important. Only after you've studied yourself and understood, you will be able to go back and find the best option available in the market, or with the same bank, or could be from a different bank. Yeah. Coming back to credit rating and report, this is one of the key items that are considered when it comes to giving a loan to an individual, to a bank. What a credit rating report shows is, it is going to simply tell you whether if it is okay to lend money to you. So every bank would decide based on your credit rating report whether I should give a loan to Bashra, whether I should give a loan to Zahid or Talha or Nav. It depends on your report. Now, let's go back to, where does this report come from? So, for example, myself, right? I've been born and brought up in Dubai. I started working when I was 19 years old. So the moment I started working, I go into the bank, right? I will ask to open a salary account. And you do know that in Dubai, or in most of the developed countries, everything is linked to your Emirates ID. In Pakistan, if you call it your NIC card. So your national ID card has all your details linked. So if I go to a bank and I open a salary account, the first thing they ask me was, well, passport copy, visa copy, Emirates ID. So a central bank will always have all your records linked to your Emirates ID. Now, what they would do is, every time my salary is credited into the account, they have a record. Every time I spend on my credit card, they have a record. I could have 10 different credit cards from 10 different banks, and everything will be linked to my Emirates ID. I take a car loan, which is about a monthly mortgage of over a 5-year period. That is also linked to my Emirates ID. I take a home loan and I'm doing payments on time every month. That is also linked to my Emirates ID. So all in all, this credit card report will give a rating to an individual based on all the different income and outgoing that you have financially, which is linked to your account and where you're based, especially in the countries where they would be issuing a loan to you. So what would happen is, for example, tomorrow, I'm planning to go for a house loan. I'm going to go to the bank, which could be my bank, or I could try different banks. And I could go and I tell them, I've finalized a property. I need a loan for 1 million dirhams. Will you approve a loan for me? What is the interest rate you would charge? What is the time period for which you can give me a loan? The first thing they would ask you is, they'll tell you, fill in the application form and we'll get back to our credit department. And the moment they take it back to the credit department, the first thing they would extract is a credit rating report for myself. And when they extract a credit rating report, they would get all details from the time I've started working, and it's not a time period, entire history of how many times my salary has come on time, what is the amount that is coming in my salary. So I can't just give a salary certificate or an amount which does not tie back with what actually comes in my account. How many times I've defaulted on my credit card payments, how many times my check has been bounced, how many times I have given a delayed payment. Even my Etisalat payments are tracked on this credit rating report. So last month, and you can in Dubai, I know for a fact, once you have a salary account and a statement for yourself, you can yourself extract your credit rating report. So there's a particular link which I can share after this session, but only if you have your accounts running in Dubai. You can go to that link, put in your Emirates ID number, they charge you 100 dirhams, and they will give you the exact rating report that a bank would get. And in that, they have an indicator from yellow to green or red, which shows whether you're in the yellow zone where banks will think before giving you a loan, or you're in the green zone where they think where it's good to give a loan to this person. And that rating is decided on the next couple of pages. It's a very detailed report. When I extracted for myself, I could see all the Etisalat payments I've done, all the electricity payments that I've done, credit card payments. There was one time where I had delayed Etisalat payment by more than a month and it was flagging up. So every little payment or everything that you do now will reflect in your credit rating report. It will give you an indicator of whether you're a good person to give a loan or a bad person. And then based on that report, a bank would give you a loan or not. So that is in a nutshell what a credit rating report is. And maybe not for yourself, but as a sample, if your parents want to. There are a lot of people who still do not know how to extract a credit rating report themselves. They think it is something that only a bank can get. No. So based in Dubai, I would definitely share a link where if your parents want it, they could log in. It's an Emirates ID linked place and you're going to pay in your 100 dirhams using a credit card, and they would send you the report on your email, and it is going to show the entire history. It also shows the number of credit cards you have open. It also shows the number of debit cards you have. It also shows if there was any given point in time that you had zero balance in your account. So it's a very, very detailed, comprehensive report. A lot of things that even I don't remember if I've not made a payment or time or so on and so on. So I will definitely share that link with you. And it will come handy throughout, at least that link is for Dubai or for UAE. So throughout the time that you're there, every time you want to get a loan and you want to check your report yourself before applying for a loan, I usually do that myself. So I am planning, for example, an investment in Dubai. and I'm planning to apply for a loan. I extracted my report. I saw a lot of credit cards that I opened, but I never used. And that reduces your credit rating because then there are chances that you will use it because it's active. So what I did was I got the report, I called every bank, went to those banks, closed my credit cards because I'm not going to use them. Now, there are a lot of people, a lot of elders I knew who said, well, I'm not using the card. How does it matter? I mean, at least I'm not spending on it. It's just for emergency. Yes, it is, but it reduces your credit rating. Always remember. Because it's an open liability for the bank. The bank thinks any day you might use it. How does that link to the loan you're asking? If I'm asking for 1 million dirhams, but I already have credit cards which I'm not using, but have a limit of 50,000 dirhams, they will give me 1 million minus the 50,000. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. Because you already have in hand, not cash, but allowed amount. So the moment I cut off on my credit cards, I will be able to get a bigger amount. So that's how it works. People don't realize this unless they go asking for a loan. And sometimes a lot of people, big businessmen, who are not aware of what is a credit rating report and the level of detail that report gives. So I extracted this 2 months ago. I fixed it. When I say I fixed it, I have called up the banks that is showing open credit card. I've put in an application to close the credit cards. I've followed up. I've got a closure letter. And then I extracted my rating report again after 2 months. And I've got a better rating. Now I will go to the bank and ask for a loan. So these are the sort of things you need to do earlier before you plan to get a loan or invest or mortgage, because fix your credit ratings. It's important. And every bank refers to it. Are there any questions on this?
I just want to add a quick point to what you mentioned. So in some part of the world, even your credit rating, so for example, you go for a rental property or even setting up your postpaid bill, they're going to check your credit rating for those purposes as well. So if you don't have a good credit rating, you will struggle with that, finding the property, even your postpaid setup, electricity setup, and all those things.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to be fair, I learned about this and extracting and reading the report because I wanted to get a property here and get a house mortgage here, is when I realized the bank guy was really nice to explain to a detailed level to me. Sometimes we assume that we are from a finance background, so we know it all. Sometimes, you have people who are big businessmen, not from a finance background, but they do have a lot of money, but they do not know what a credit rating report is. And everything is being tracked, especially in these parts of the world where we stay in, especially Dubai or UK or US. You've got to be very careful that one delayed payment on even your Etisalat bill will flag up in your credit rating report. So I learned, getting back to Tabish's point, only when I went ahead and I wanted to find out about the loan. No one in school, no one in university taught me how to extract and read. I knew what a credit rating report was. I knew that a bank can get that report, but I was not aware until a couple of months or years ago that I can extract it for myself and see what does that report say about me and what I need to fix. So that's an important takeaway that I would want you guys to take, because this will help you not just lifelong, but even today, a lot of your parents might not know. And it's a very simple report. If there's any help you need in reading, especially the one from UAE, you can always come back to me and ask me. But there are very simple ways they will list down all the banks you have accounts open in, loan accounts, car loan, house loan, your payments. Its cards are open but not being used. Even cards that they were open, you've closed them. They're all in the history in that report. So that's a quick check to keep in mind, and probably an action item to take back from this session. But we have the last final section, which is quite shorter than this one, but I'm going to quickly go on to the next, unless we have any other questions here. I know we are running over time, so I'm just trying to quickly squeeze in the last bit. Zainab, we can move on to the next slide. Yep. All right. Now, coming to investments. This section is not talking about hardcore investments in terms of, I'm not going to teach you should invest in gold and house and property and shares, etc. But just the key things that you need to keep in mind at this stage, at least. One is restrict your future outgoing via good health. Now, this is a very long, short topic, very, very long, short. But we know in Dubai, while we stay as residents, we have insurances from our company. And in some cases, we do get insurances for our families, depending on if you're a manager position or higher. In some cases, we don't. For example, today, when I sponsor my parents in Dubai, my company would cover for my husband or kids if I had, but they wouldn't cover for my parents. So I need to buy their insurances. Now, a good health will always equate to less liability in the future. And why I'm saying this is we don't realize this, and it's a very long relationship. But if you're in good health and you maintain yourself in good health, you're less likely to spend on expensive procedures when it comes to medical and medications and so on. It doesn't flag up now, but it does flag up not in the very long run, in a couple of months, in a couple of years. And a very simple example is right now when I get insurance for my parents, right? When I go to buy out insurances, health insurances, first thing they ask me is, are they 50 above? Yes. So the price is higher. Then they're going to ask me, do they have blood pressure? The price is again higher. Do they have sugar? The price is again increased. And by the time I come to the final payment of the insurance plan, it's so expensive that, and this is one of the reasons why a lot of people before sponsoring parents to Dubai think, because more than the visa process fees is the insurance that is expensive. And hence a lot of times when my parents come back to Pakistan, we spend a good 2 weeks and we do all full complete checkups here, because when I go back to Dubai, even though I have an insurance, even in that, there are a lot of clauses where a lot of things are not covered. So my whole point of explaining this is at an age that I'm saying. But if you have good health, even at a younger age, one, it goes a long way in the long run. But second, also today, there are companies that do not cover everything. They will have clauses. There are companies that would cover for you, but they will not cover for your wife or for your kids. And in that case, anytime you fall sick, it's a good expense where you pay full fees for your consultations, for your medicines, for your specialist, and so on and so forth. So it might not be directly related to investment, but I would say you invest good stuff in your health and it does go a long way. So it might be not a directly related point, but something that we always need to bear in mind. It will show up long term. One of the other things that we need to make sure is we educate ourselves on the different options available. Now, like I said, this session, I'm not going to talk about how you invest in property, how you invest in stocks, how you invest in house, gold, shares. But what is important is you educate yourself, and it will not always happen from books. It will not happen from theory. Practical is a lot more than what is there in theory. And I'm going back to, like, Tabish.
Sure.
He's stuck again.
I think Neelam is stuck again. It's okay. Let's give it another minute. Let's give it another minute. It happens.
Guys, I'm still waiting for someone to share a tip with me. Please.
I think Neelam had to drop out. Oh, no, she's here. She's here.
At least one of you. So anybody else wants to give an example of need versus want?
I'm open to
Because that's a
that.
very, yeah, that's a very key concept, to understand. So who's going to give an example, a good example of,
Um, I just have a tiny thing. It's like, for instance, your needs is like all your grocery and everything. For instance, my family, how they do it. I mean, if I want to give an example, it's like when it's time for the salary, they'll literally just sit down and then they'll just take out, okay, we're gonna spend on this, and this. And then they'll say, okay, all right, we need to hand over your pocket money too. So that is one of our expenses, but you're only gathering those money. So that will be another way. And then it's like, for instance, I need to spend on that pocket money. I will have my own needs and my wants. Now, my needs are obviously fulfilled by my parents, right? For now, right now, because I don't earn. But for my wants, for instance, I read a lot. Now I have to sit down and say that, okay, this month I'm going to spend only this much on my books. I'm going to spend only this much on the branded shoes I want or the branded makeup I want. And I'm only going to spend, and I'm going to save the rest. Just whatever change I get, everything else that I get, I'm just going to put it away and forget that I have it. It's going to be like a good way of saving as well. So I'm differentiating, even though it's just my pocket money, but I'm still differentiating between my needs and my wants. And then so you realize how much you can keep. And then at the end of the year, you're going to be proud of yourself when you figure out how much you've actually collected.
that's excellent. Uh, Something that I will recommend, for most of you to read if you are interested in this topic. There is a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Uh,
Heard of
many of
it.
Yes, many of you might have already read about it, heard about it. I am just recommending if someone wants to go through it, just check it out, and if it is something that is of your interest, it's a good read. And there is a game based on that as well, so you might try
Could
your
you
hands on it
mention
as
the
well.
author? Who's the author?
The author is Robert Kiyosaki.
Thank
He's a
you.
very popular guy, actually, very well known for this.
Yeah, and the
That
book
is
is
sad
awesome.
that I
I've
do not
not written
know.
it fully, but like some of it.
Just try it out. I think Neelam is here, so
Yeah, sorry guys,
Yeah.
but quickly wrapping up on the last slide now. Last two slides actually. So we were talking about educate yourself. When I went down into finding out about how to go in for a mortgage for a house, I did have to go back a couple of times to ask them a lot of basic questions. And it's not about looking stupid. Believe me, I, being a finance person and the bank person, was expecting I would know how to read a credit rating report. I did not know. So you need to be shameless, I would say, if that's the term, and ask what happens. Sometimes they use the terms, they use very complicated banking terms. This is a flexible rate, this is a flexi rate, this is a fixed rate, this is a standard rate, interest rate. I said, you know what? I could be from a finance background and I do not know what's the difference between these, because you could interpret it differently and I could interpret it differently. So this person actually sat down to explain to me. I said, okay, explain to me in numbers. What is the difference between them? What is the amount that I will have to pay monthly if it is a standard rate, if it is a flexi rate? So those sort of things, being a finance person, I would rather I would rather go ahead and ask the question. Is everybody able to hear me? Because I think
Yeah,
my
yeah,
screen
yeah.
is
yes, yes.
You
going
clear.
back low. And in any point when you don't, please let me know. The other thing that I would want to, I mean, I personally believe is one of the first few assets that I would want to create would be a house or a home mortgage. If via it's a mortgage or via it's a saving, it could be a one room, but that's something it's an absolute need and you will need for the rest of your life. And if you are certain of where you are going to stay, whether it's for yourself or whether it's for the purpose of getting a house and renting it, that's probably one of the first few assets that I always personally feel a person should try to get in hand. And it could be early in your career, later in your career. It's not about whether it's a one studio apartment or it's a one bedroom, but it's just safety, because at the end of the day, that is one of the need items. And the moment you strike off your need items, you know those monthly payments are gone, because a house or an apartment, whatever you want to call it, is not something that will ever be not required. You will always need a place to stay. Yes, there are a lot of factors you consider around it in terms of, if I know for long term I would want to stay in Pakistan, then I'm a sure decision I take something here. If I know I would want to live in Dubai, then I make sure I take it there. If I want to stay in Dubai, but I want to do it for just a rental income basis, then maybe I'll buy something in Pakistan and make sure the rent goes in there. But again, when I do something outside my country, I also think about, once I convert it back to dirhams, I may be at a loss. Today, the exchange rate is different. Tomorrow, the exchange rate might be different. So it would be advisable if I buy something in Pakistan, if I'm living and spending in Pakistan, so I don't have to convert it. So there are a lot of factors. It's a very much deeper discussion. But at the end of the day, for whatever purpose it is, whether it is for yourself, whether it is to generate an income, one of the first few I prioritize when, if ever I want to start investing in, would probably be a house mortgage. However, administratively, that's a longer process than investing in gold or in stocks, especially in gold, because gold, you walk into a market, you go, you buy, and then you keep it easily administered. You go in for a house mortgage, you take months to get approval from the bank, check your rating, fix your credit card report, go back to them again, get an approval, get the money sanctioned, move into your account, find something else. So administratively, yes, but again, that has a much more longer term benefit or motive that you might have versus something like a gold or a stock exchange or a stock market. And then you have remuneration versus replication. I will come back to the questions on the chat box at the end of the slide, because I see a couple of them. Then you've got remuneration versus replication. So, and there was a very good example of this online while I was reading. Remuneration is basically the salary that you get monthly, right? And then replication is how are you multiplying it? And I'm not going to talk about big examples of how you do it and e-commerce and big companies. And I'm talking about individual level. So one of the very good examples that was given was one of these old actors, famous actors now. He was working in theater. And when it comes to working in a theater, you have, 100 seats in a theater and 100 people that would come in, pay in, come sit there and watch it. Back in those days, obviously, you couldn't record and those sort of things. So you're limiting your income to 100 people. In other words, you could count it as your remuneration or your salary. Now, moving on to how do you multiply it? In today's world, the same actor moved out from doing a stage performance or a theater show into doing movies. Now, the moment you do movies, it's on a recording, it can be played 100 times versus a one-time show. And the moment it can be played multiple times, they are different medias. Over time, we moved on to VCRs, TVs, VCRs, DVDs, USBs, now online. So he changed his way of doing the same, presenting the same talent. So he could still, even today, there are people who prefer going to the theater and seeing things live. But as an artist, you're actually limiting yourself there. So you've got a very fine line between understanding remuneration, but you've got to find ways of replicating. Now, as a basic in a teaching industry, we've seen, especially with COVID now, where schools have gone online, even tuitions teaching, where I could cater for 10 people in a room now, I'm catering for 20 virtually and probably earning more. So we've got to find in our own specific fields how to multiply, and it will be very specific to yourself, or to other people who are in different fields. I cannot, or we cannot give a generic rule that, well, let's do everything virtual. Maybe in your field, in your talent, it can't be done. So it's important to start thinking of ways of, once I get a source of income, there's got to be a source of multiplying it, and not just every month I get 1,000 means for the rest of my life I'm okay with 1,000. It's got to multiply with the same amount of effort. I don't want to open up more places. Maybe there's a smarter way of doing it. So again, it becomes a very specific discussion to every field and every talent that we have in the market. But we've got to start thinking of different ways of doing a replication than just being okay with a remuneration level and getting a salary or a fixed source of income. I was quickly going through the chat boxes, and I may have missed out a couple of questions because after I've joined back in, the older ones in case. One of the questions from Furkan was, while working as an amateur, should a person start saving, then constructing a house or take a huge amount of loan? You should always first make sure you have a habit of saving, because some people don't have a habit. So first you'll have to develop a habit of saving, even if it's 5 dirhams or 10 dirhams. Second, when it comes to constructing a house or taking an amount of loan, those buckets, it will not come as soon as you get a job. But one of the things you also need to bear in mind is anytime you go for a loan, whether it's a house loan or a car loan, there is always a down payment amount. So if you're asking for $1 million, they'll say, yeah, you put down 20% of that amount. So in the first place, you will not be able to go for a loan unless you have a 20% or 25% ready with you. So technically, your habit of saving should have saved you that amount. Only then will you be, so you will have to start saving first and then move on to this. Now, the purpose, one thing you can do is save and keep the money. You save and you invest it, and not save it with you in cash, because you invest with the mindset that it's going to increase or it is going to multiply, where we were talking about replication. So you will put it down in stock markets, where every time it fluctuates, and every time it fluctuates on the positive side, you do get a dividend out of it. So there are different ways of multiplication, but I would always say at the stage you guys are at, make sure you develop the habit of saving. Only then will you be able to go in for a multiplication, replication, or getting down loans for your house mortgage. But ultimately, when you start investing, one of the common misconceptions, or I wouldn't say misconception, the habit that's there back in our Asian family especially, is we think of investing very late. We will become 40 or 50 years old, and then we would say, now I want to construct a house. Now I want to go in for, or I should have. There's a lot of regret. I should have done this when I was 30s or 40s or early 30s. That's a norm that you need to break. The earlier you start doing these things, the earlier you'll be financially free, financially confident, financially secure, financially independent. Because one of the other things that a bank will see while giving you a loan, the time period, is your age. If you're a 50-year-old going for a loan, they will not give you a loan for more than 5 years or 6 years, because there's a limit of an age that they will tie into your loan period as well. So these are the sort of things you will have to keep in mind. But again, saving first, of course, then you go in for other ways of investing. So I would say saving comes in the first step.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
That's all right. Then I'm looking, no other questions that I can see unless I've missed out anything. But I'm going to quickly ask Zainab to move on to the final slide, which is a closure slide of this session. This is talking about common misconceptions we have when it comes to finances. One of them, like I said, is starting late or investing late, or not asking the question because you're shy. So you need to break those habits. But a couple of other things. One is non-finance person is not a word. You need to absorb this. You could be a science student, you could be whatever student, but there are certain basics of finance that all of us need to know. Today, you do not survive by saying, I'm not a finance person, so I don't understand these terminologies. I don't want to do this. Yes, there are finance people who are fit for accounting roles, for finance roles. I agree. That's in the corporate world. But speaking of your day to day lives, you will have to understand what's a credit rating report because a bank will take out your report for a loan, regardless you're an engineer or a doctor. So these are basics you have to understand. We need to stop saying I'm a non-finance person, so I don't want to know this. I don't want to attend a basic knowledge session on this. We all need to know if you want to manage it well. A lot of time people have had a lot of money and lost it and become poor because they've not educated themselves enough. And they've also blamed it on the fact that I'm not a finance person. So that's not, we need to get away from that mindset. One of the other things that we need to also understand is, I don't know how many of us here, but commerce students or economic students always know, we've studied about resources. We've studied about, resources are scarce and we need to make a choice between need and want. But we need to also always remember, if you start thinking that money is scarce and it's limited, your attitude towards it will also be like that. So you've got to open up your mind and think it's just out there and I need to reach out to get that in. Whether it's through proper negotiations with the companies, whether it's through investing, whether it's saving and then using the money for anything. But the mindset needs to change. If I start thinking that money is scarce, I'm going to think, well, what's the point of me negotiating or asking for it? And a simple example is if I walk in for an interview and if I know it's a big multinational company, I know they can afford well, I need to stop thinking that if I ask a big amount, they're not going to give it to me or they might not be able to afford me. So I know it's got to be a balance, but we need to move out of that mindset. One of the other things that I also discuss often with my finance students is you need to feel your goal. And one of the ways of doing this is you need to imagine yourself and picture yourself. Where do I want to see myself? Not in 5 years or 10 years down the lane, but maybe in another 2 years. I mean, I personally do that a lot. And some people do struggle with it. It takes a bit of time. Like I already have goals when it comes to travels. Next year, I need to complete 4 more countries. Amazing. What am I doing about it? Similarly, for financials, I always thought, well, before I turn 25, I want to have a car on my name, which is not mortgage payment. Okay, so what am I doing now to do this? Is everyone able to hear me right now?
Yeah.
Okay, because I'm getting a message that is going low on battery. So if I'm picturing myself at the age of 25, I want to have no loan and a car on my name. Maybe on 21, I started on my auto loan and I've cleared it off in 5 years, 4 years. So 25, I'm car loan free. Before 30, I want to have a house on my name. Okay, what am I doing about it now? So there are goals you need to set. There are images of yourself that you need to imagine to work backwards. And then you reach out to people to educate yourself. Find out people who've done this in their practical life. Create your role models. It's important because theory in books will not take you there. You will always need people who've practically done it to guide you. And today, what might be working today might not be something that worked 10 years ago. Sometimes the basics of what my parents or my dad would tell me about investing is, I'm not saying it's wrong, but some of it may not work today. And I will have to find out someone who's doing the same foreign exchange play today or investing in houses today because rules have changed, norms have changed, banks have changed their terms and conditions. So I will take the basic of his experience from my dad, maybe, but I will still go down to someone today in the market who will be guiding me as my mentor. And it could be a person from a bank or it could be someone who's not from a finance background but has done a similar investment. So you can't say I have to fall back with someone who's done it before and a couple of years back is wrong or someone doing now is wrong. It will have to be a mix.
And you will have to take in as much knowledge from both and always, and then find out what's happening in the market right now. There are specialist companies also who guide you. That, plus, of course, finding someone who's practically done, achieved the goals that you want to achieve for yourself. Be with your role models. It's still linking back to the old stuff. And what I mean by this is you need to look up high if you want to go up high. And I'm going to give you a very simple example. I do go to a lot of networking events in Dubai from my, well, ones that are arranged by CPA organizations or ACCA organizations, where people from different companies come and meet and network. And when you talk to them, you do find out a lot of people who are very ambitious. We say this in the work field, that you do stay around people you want to become like. When you're younger and when you're kids, you will hear this a lot from our parents, saying that, your surroundings will have an impact on you. If you have good friends, you will be a good person. If you have bad friends, you will develop bad habits and you will be a bad person. And this concept follows throughout your life, not just from your group perspective, but also from your professional life and your goals perspective. If you have certain goals, I have goals of having a house for myself. I have managed to find out one or two people who have invested young, made houses young. And when I say young, I mean like not in 40s and 50s, in their 30s, in their late 20s, and started their work young. So I'm learning from them. But only when I'm around them, I will be able to do this. So I've managed. That doesn't mean that my entire friend circle is to do with these kind of people. I've been able to find out one or two who will help me with my goals. You do have your set of friends that you hang out with. You need to have mentors and examples that you want to follow for professional life. You also need to have mentors and examples, or people who would guide you in your personal life as well. Because a specialist person or a specialist company will guide you in terms of knowledge, but a person who is a mentor to you, who personally knows you, who's talking from their experience, who you touch base with regularly, they will be able to guide you based on your circumstances as well, which perhaps a specialist company or your book knowledge will not be able to guide you on, because everyone's situation is different. So that's important. Discuss money at any age. I know back in our homes, even in my family, we always had this concept of, let's not talk about money in front of kids, or this is not a discussion that kids should be involved. Well, yes, I agree. A lot of bigger discussions when it comes to investment and all of that, you don't have your kids around. But basic discussions about money, about saving. And I'm going back to Zahid's example. He could be getting a chocolate and selling it back to someone else in the house. But what I'm saying is, basic knowledge on money should still be there and discussed at homes. And this is something I tell people who are elder in the homes, not necessarily parents, but also people who have younger brothers and sisters. I always had the habit of making sure my brothers go get something from grocery. They have a 5 dirham note. They should know, if I spend 2 dirhams, I should get 3 dirhams in change. Basic maths. But that's the level I'm saying. I'm not saying with your kids or with your younger brothers and sisters, you talk about investments, but talk basic numbers. If you don't do it at that point, suddenly when they grow old, you talk about big numbers and loans and rates and cards, they will not know. Very simple recent example. My mom never knew the difference between a debit and a credit card. So I'm not surprised a student doesn't know. My mom didn't know. She always knew there is a card, you go to an ATM and you get a money. So I had to sit down a couple of days back to explain to her the difference. I made her a supplementary card. I gave it to her and she started panicking, saying, how am I going to take out money from it? I said, you need to go to an ATM, pin in your PIN number and take out the money. Today, she's able to do that after 50 plus. All her life, she did not know. But I'm happy because it's never too late. But she's learned a debit card is different, because I explained to her that has money in it and you're spending my money, so be careful. And a credit card is from the bank, where again, I will have to pay back. So I'm going to ask you, what did you spend it on? But you need to know the difference. And this is not a finance terminology. It is something that people need to be educated at home, whether it's your brothers, your sisters, your parents. I mean, my parents still don't know a lot. I'm still learning on what I need to teach them. She did not understand the concept of a supplementary card. So I said, well, the name says it's on your name, but it's linked to my account and the money is in my account and it's getting deducted from there. So those are the kind of basic discussions you need to have. A lot of times, fathers are going out in the field, mothers are not. Start having those discussions with them in basic layman terms, because that education is important in family, brothers, sisters, parents, and so on. And the last point that I would close it off with is learn ways of generating money, multiplying and replicating it. Don't think that if I don't have money right now, I can't. I'm still going to go back to that chocolate example, even though I don't like it because I don't like selling chocolates. But
Because
you
yeah,
didn't have to
figures
have
out.
money to create the money. So tomorrow, I could be a poor person, but my parents have spent on my education, and I know that I need to go through these steps and reach this level to earn this much of a salary to give them a nice luxurious life. But that doesn't necessarily mean 10 years back I had the money, because the money doesn't guarantee money. There are people who are really rich. There are people who get, well, I would say be smart at financial literacy, because there are people who, well, were lucky. They inherited money. Not all of us are lucky in that aspect. They worked hard for it. There are people who get lotteries, raffle draw, coupons, and win. But that doesn't mean they would have the money for the rest of their life. A smart person will be able to do two things. One, if they have the money, they multiply and find a way of keeping it running even while they're sleeping. So you need to find a way, first, where you're working hard, but second, where you might not need to work hard and it will still start giving you the money. And the second would always be, you don't need to have money to multiply it. You need to first create that source of income. So that's important. We need to stop thinking of, well, people who are rich will always stay rich. No. A lot of rich people have gone down in the ratings when it comes to the wealthiest person. Tomorrow might not be the wealthiest person. So these are common misconceptions we have about finance, the finance world. But when talking about daily finances and investments, it is everybody's world. It's not a finance person's world. So that's it from my side on this session. Are there any questions, any comments, any feedback that you want to give now, apart from, of course, testimonials that we would request you to give at the end? Coming on to the last slide, which is just talking about, I'd like to hear from all of you. Probably any one thing that was, well, knowledge wise, there's a lot to grasp. You could still go back to this deck, the recording will be there. But any one thing that you will practically take back just today or tomorrow to implement, or that you would want to do with your family, which you believe is lacking in terms of knowledge or education, or of all the things that we've discussed. There are a lot of things actually, and everything is very practical. None of these items I've tried to put down are something that you need to be working and earning a salary to do. Most of these are just, starting that discussion, understanding from people in your family who knows a debit or a credit card. I will share the link for the rating report. That's an amazing exercise. And it's actually very interesting when you sit down with your parents and you understand, or they actually go through their rating and realize all that goes into those reports. You probably are going to amaze them. But any feedback that someone wants to give, or anything that they would want to share, is what they're taking back today to implement right away in their lives.
Thank you so much, Neelam. Before anyone, comments, I thought I'll jump in. While I think during one of your session drops, I recommended them, reading a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I think I want to touch it back to your concept of, active income, passive income. So maybe this will help as well.
Yes. Yes.
So I have recommended them this book, by Robert Kiyosaki.
Have you put this down on the chat box? Can you please repeat the name?
Sure, I will do that.
Anybody else would like to add anything right now before we wrap up?
I had a small question.
Yeah.
If you could suggest some ways we can invest or in some sort of business at this age, because I think we're going into our practical life and we should start learning to not depend on our parents. So are there specific suggestions you can give?
I would say the easiest, least administrative. First, of course, I'm assuming that you already have a habit of saving some amount.
Yes, I do.
Then once you have an amount, see, if you go for something big, like a house or a car, of course that requires a big amount, so that probably would not be practical at this stage. But speaking of smaller amounts and less administrative, but you'll have to educate yourself, is an easier way of doing it is gold or foreign currencies, where, but you've got to be careful and knowledgeable about how foreign currencies work. So I could be um, well, I could exchange it for a US dollar, but that's pegged with dirhams. And then tomorrow, if I want to convert it to rupees, I know versus rupees, US dollar is getting only stronger every year. So then it makes more sense. I mean, I'm just giving a simple example, but foreign currency is a bit more complicated. You need to have someone by your side who can, in the initial stages, guide you on how conversions work and how you will benefit when you convert it back. Similarly, when you go in for putting in money into gold, if you believe, and again, it works in a lot in terms of studying the market trend and understanding the trend that is being followed. It does come with a lot of institution, because I would expect and something might not happen, but in the next couple of months, if I am seeing that the gold prices are going up, I would probably buy something of 6,000 dirhams today, and tomorrow it might become, when it comes to selling, worth 6,500, and I sell it back, or I want to do it for a longer term. So it all comes with educating yourself. It also comes with the amount of risk you're ready to take, because different assets, different things, for example, gold, stocks, foreign currency, or any other asset, house or car, they have a different rate at which they appreciate. Certain properties take years to appreciate, certain areas are like that. Certain properties are within the city, they appreciate very quickly in a couple of years. So it also depends on the number of years you're ready to tie in your money for, and you don't need it back. Do you want to do it for 1 year, 2 years, short term investment, or do you want something that is long term? You're okay, your money is kept on a side and it's appreciating in the form of that asset. So there are different factors that you consider before you choose which item you want to invest in or which way you go. But for a start, it's difficult to go for a house mortgage per se. It's a big investment, a lot of administrative work, bank is involved, they want your credit rating history. But a less administrative one would be probably foreign currency exchange. You could go to a exchange company and do this, or gold, but again, still requires study. But it's a simpler, smaller steps of starting and understanding how to rotate money. Bear in mind, you should be keeping this at the back of your head. There are times where you get a loss. There is no guaranteed investment. But unless you learn how to take a calculated risk, you will not learn to take bigger investments and risks. So it has to start smaller somewhere. And it's good that you would want to start looking at these things now than moving on later on and suddenly jump into a very big investment, because then you become more financially confident, because you learn to take decisions for yourself, whether it's a profit or a loss. So then that makes you more confident. Does that answer your question? And are there any more questions here?
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was really helpful
I
and
do
I
have
loved
a
the session.
question,
Yeah.
ma'am. So just hypothetically, if I'm just talking about you, what would you do if you had 500 dirhams? How would you create a source of income, and how would you create your own money?
For a source of income, a 500 dirhams, again, it's not about small or big, but it is difficult to put it somewhere where it would multiply. All right. So what
Okay.
I would do is I would probably want to increase my source of income. Now, increasing would necessarily, when I will go back to my days and when I was in high school, I always had this thing of wanting to get more sources of income, even if it's 500,000 or whatever. I would do tuitioning or teaching. Again, that's not something everybody can do. It's not everyone's skill. There are people who study very good and are geniuses, but are very difficult at teaching or imparting knowledge. So maybe not everyone's baby, but from my experience, I went in for teaching. That was one thing. The other thing that I did was I used to enjoy, one of the things that I would enjoy would be dancing. Very strange to come from a Asian background, but yes. And there were a lot of parents who would want really small kids to learn basics of dancing. And I'm talking about normal Bollywood dancing, and not something I would go into detail right now. But they would come in maybe twice in a week, and I was doing something that I enjoyed, and I would earn on it because they would pay me on a monthly basis, 4 sessions. Oh, this is how much we would pay. We had options of today. Well, there are people who talk to each other and find out simple things, like when I started driving and I was in grade 12 or 13, there are other families who wanted to send their kids. And so what I would do is they would give me a monthly amount lesser than what they would pay a bus, and they would go in my car and we would carpool and go and come back. So these are basic things. These did not require any big high funda education or a lot of things. It's just you need to start using your brains of thinking what is the best way of doing it. The moment I started getting into thousands of my I started working for promotions. My parents were a bit against it, unfortunately, but I'm a bit of a stubborn person. So when you work in for promotions, you're at the chaos. Started working for Jitex. Again, that did not require too much of knowledge. Went in for interviews, did a good 6 weeks, 6 days, 1 week, got a good lump sum amount. The moment I started getting 2,000 dirhams, 1,000 dirhams, 3,000 as a collective, I did started putting down. That time gold was going at a good rate, increasing at a good rate. I did put down money. The moment I saw the prices started coming down, I sold it back and still made profit versus what I invested initially. So that was my initial stages of step, whether it was tutoring, whether it was dance classes, whether it was carpooling, whether it was doing promotions, and all of this I'm talking in high school. It's not, I had not started working at that time. So that's at that stage. Of course, when you start earning, like I would say, I went back to Aman's question, is I usually started off with smaller things like foreign currency. My dad is from a banking background, so I had very good not just support but understanding, because he used to play a lot in foreign currency, so that was good help. But I've stopped playing in foreign currency. It's not something I like doing. You've got to be attentive all the time looking into your applications, finding out what's the rate and so on and so forth. So I tested something. I have an experience. I have, for my knowledge purpose, I can tell people what my experience was, but I realized I'm not a person who would like it, so I don't do it. I don't do tuitioning anymore. I don't do dance classes anymore. So things change over time, but I think it's the need of that age group, that time, and how best I can utilize. I've done it with gold, but now I've stopped doing it with gold. The last time I sold it, I didn't buy it back. Now, then the next thing I wanted to do was get my own car. I've sorted my auto loan, it's closed. Now my next target is a house. So I think you only learn with experience, and I'm only taking the experience of all of it. The rules will slightly differ for all the different kind of assets you purchase, but again, your confidence will remain the same. It will only get better the more you put your hand into these things. So starting from small, and the examples I've given, that's where I started, so those are the recommendations I can give. But I'm sure what you need to do is you need to assess what talent you have that you can use to start generating your income. So it doesn't necessarily mean
Okay,
that you have
thank
to
you.
wait for the time to start earning a big
Perfect.
amount.
Perfect.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question, Furkan.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're way ahead of time. I
Yeah.
think anybody else, or then we'll wrap up for today. I'm going to quickly take that as a no. But of course, my email
Yeah.
ID is mentioned on the deck. The recording would be there. Feel free to drop in a note to me and connect to me directly. We don't have to wait for these sort of sessions, but it was really nice having all of you be interactive and ask questions. I don't usually like something that's a one-way thing. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, because I usually speak to students of college and universities. So I had to come down a bit to breaking things down to the basic level. But feel free to reach out to me, and thank you from my side. Have a nice day.
Thank you so much, Neelam.
Thank you so
It was
much.
really
Thank you.
insightful.
So much.
Thank you all the participants for joining the session. I just want to have one request I put on the chat. So if you could submit your testimonials on pyfdubai@gmail.com.
Thank you so much.
And we'd like to hear from you how you found about the
Sure.
session.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of
Thank
the
you
day.
so much.
All right.
This session
Thank
was
you.
amazing.
All right.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.